Hello again, everybody, and welcome inside the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show. I am George, the Howitzer Gerbo.
And I am Mike, the Buzz-saw Asti.
Sports Talk back with you here as we make our way out of summer and into fall. Temperatures get cooler,
It's officially
days get
fall.
shorter.
It is
It's
fall,
officially
y'all.
fall.
Yep.
Things start heating up on the gridiron, on the diamond, and elsewhere, and we're excited to cover it all here on the HBS. Mike, the Buzz-saw Asti, has been a busy person, myself included. I've been I usually downplay, but I've been real busy too. So it's been a busy end of summer. You've had football and craziness and weather delays and everything else in between, and I've had football and golf as well. So it's been a fun last couple of weeks. Glad to be
Yeah,
back.
I mean, the difference is,
At it.
though, that when there's downtime, I have a toddler. So it's like another job.
That's why I said you've been busy.
Yeah. So I don't really have time to myself to enjoy. That's probably why I think I literally golfed 3 times this past summer, and George might have went 3 times in a week. So we should. I may actually suggest next summer, because generally in the beginning of the summer, usually you're beating me by about 2 to 4 strokes, and the end of the summer it may pick up a little bit. I almost think we need to handicap it because you're golfing quadruple the amount of times I golf.
That's true.
It's almost like we golf once, you win by a couple strokes, and then I don't golf again for like 2 more months while you're practicing golf. So like I don't know how that I don't know if that's totally
no, it's a fair point.
Situation, because back in the day, and I do have some friends that grew up with me or family. Back in the day, I was money, and that's when I went all the time. But then I got out of it. But yeah, the toddler doesn't help the golf game at all. And the toddler is getting older. She's cuter, but she's also crazier. And I may or may not have written many articles while I'm juggling her with one arm. So yeah, I don't really have any downtime, and I have covered 3 weather delays. I've asked multiple SIDs to confirm any other program that's had 3 at home in a 2-year stretch or 2 in 1 season. And I've got a lot of, well, I don't know, because they didn't used to count it. People have literally argued, like, they didn't used to keep track. I'm sure some school in Florida. Like, okay, well, now we're keeping track, and there's been 3 at WU and they're not in Florida.
Yeah.
But
no,
yeah,
it's been asinine. Yeah.
Very, very, very busy, but the weather is cooperating. It's giving you warm enough, but not too warm. A little brisk every now and then at night. I'm liking it. I'm liking the weather, and we're getting into pumpkin patch season. We're getting into, where candy corn's overrated and actually trash, and we're getting into all of that here as we approach October, despite not yet there.
The crazy part was that I didn't. The round we played Memorial Day weekend was the first time I got out for an actual round all year, and then I went ham with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, then you went. I think I went 1 or 2 other times after that, but
yeah, and then I've got backloaded. I got 2 more, definitely 2 more in October. That might be the end of it, but we'll see. But covering golf has been fun too. Shout out to the American women U.S. team who won the Solheim Cup. So fun victory for them. And if you like international competition, President's Cup is on this week from Canada. So you got your golf update here on the HBS for a few of us that are interested.
Yeah.
But a reminder that you can find the HBS wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, TuneIn, Google/YouTube, Apple, and more. Just search Howitzer in your favorite podcast app. Also, a reminder, you can find all of the music that you hear right here each time on the HBS, courtesy of our friend Kellen B-Conley at -universe.com. Subscribe to his new newsletter. He's got music videos dropping for each of the latest songs off of his new album. Check it out, -universe.com.
I'm wondering how he has time to film all these music videos, quite frankly. But
Ocean City, film one in Ocean City.
Right on the boardwalk. One in Ocean City, yeah, but he has at least 4 or 5 that I've watched, so it's not just that one. And
late release.
Late release. I wonder when these were filmed initially. It's probably now matriculating out from months ago. But yeah, a lot of new music there from
distribution schedule.
And we will eventually mix that into a new montage or something like that here for the HBS. But of course, You can hear sweet melodies of Kellen BF and Conley here in the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show.
You want him to you want him to do us a new
I was referring to picking maybe a newer song. We use Champion a lot.
I'm
a champion.
That's absolutely.
Why not use Champion? But
I feel like you've requested from him. You've requested a new montage from him. Like you want him to do.
Well, I would like a rendition of just me personally. I would like him to maybe freestyle a Buzzsaw theme. And maybe we could work in the Howitzer and Buzz-saw, but
there we go.
I don't know. Yeah, he's a busy man as well, but nonetheless, there's a lot of new music from B-Hyphen that's out there that we could certainly pick from. Mm-hmm. And as we are getting busier, it's because the sports calendar is heating up as well, and we are getting into the busiest portion of the sports calendar. It's hard to be mad about what's going on right now when you get into baseball postseason, hockey will start up, but football in full swing, college and pros, and then even college basketball now. Practice started this week.
Yeah, practices for some. We've got media days wrap up.
NBA media day, this week.
Yeah, college basketball media days next week. Conferences, and then after that, the program one. So that's I ain't ready for that. I'm good. It's just people are coaxing on. I'm not there yet, but get there soon enough.
Yeah.
We'll save basketball for another day. Let's start with the National Football League, where you're starting to see some separation from teams at the tops of these divisions in some cases. And at the same time, you've got a little bit of chaotic results, which I think you chalk up to the fact that the first 2 weeks and now even 3 weeks of the season, just people aren't established yet. And you've got more young players playing in the league, specifically at key positions like quarterback and skills positions like quarterback, running back, and wide receiver than you have before. You got a lot of young defenses in some cases, and with less preseason games for them to come together as a unit, specifically on the first unit that you're going to send out there as your starters, it's allowed, I believe, for this kind of, you can call it parody, you can call it craziness or lackluster or whatever. There's a little bit of everything for everybody in there, where you've got a team like Dallas who loses in consecutive weeks to New Orleans, who then they lose to New Orleans and Baltimore in consecutive weeks. Baltimore hadn't won a game yet. New Orleans then goes the following week, this past week, and only scores 3 points through 45 minutes against Philadelphia, and is still in that game all the way to the end, and the Eagles squeak out a victory in the Superdome. That's your one weird end of the spectrum for a team that most people had either winning that division or 12 to 14 wins, give or take. And then you've got stories like the Minnesota Vikings, who
Sam Darnold, baby. I've been believing in him for a decade. Sam Darnold, baby.
Where people were concerned.
I'm on the record.
Oh my God, JJ McCarthy, our quarterback that we drafted, is injured in the preseason. He's out for the year. And you and I were both like, yeah, but they weren't going to, like, Sam Darnold, they brought him in the plan to be the starter, and he has led the Minnesota Vikings to, they were a home underdog to.
Well, I'm sure Sam's out next year, though. I mean, I'm new in the NFL, and with all the money invested in JJ, Sam Darnold's not playing for the Vikings future. He's playing for his next job elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I even had somebody bring this up to me, which would be hilarious if Aaron Rodgers retires at the end of this season. Sam Darnold's looking for a job after potentially a great season. The Jets would then have a quarterback vacancy. Could they get back together and apologize to each other and then go back to the Sam Darnold business in New York? But Sam Darnold, baby, yeah, he's turned back the clock to his college days. And it's interesting too, because we've now seen this with several quarterbacks, Geno Smith to the peak of it, where you have a dip in your career or you go nowhere. And then after so many years of just learning or going out there and not getting the job done,
the right situation or something,
back and forth, you either find the right situation or you just get smart enough. Geno Smith has had historic seasons that if he was younger, he'd be in a Hall of Fame pace. That's how historic he's been the last few years, because he's just smarter. Now, there are picks there, but he's very efficient. He's very smart with the football usually, and that's what we're seeing from Sam Darnold so far this year. I'm sure you wouldn't see that from a rookie, but who would have thought that they lose Kirk Cousins, who's 4,000 yards every year? They wanted to bring him back. He chooses to go to Atlanta, and right now the Vikings are better than the Falcons. Now, obviously, he's still getting things going, and it's hard to say the Falcons lost to Kansas City is that big of a deal. They're still kind of learning each other, but the Vikings right now are certainly in an early driver's seat, and then there's also been some weirdness. The Packers lose Jordan Love, but they're still winning games with Malik Willis, who people basically gave up on and said he was not nearly what anybody talked about. I still don't believe in Malik Willis, but they're winning without Jordan Love. And you have the Carolina Panthers, who everyone's playing young quarterbacks. They give up on one that was their first-round pick already, and they win without him, but they're already done in the Bryce Young business. So opposite ends of the spectrum here, but a lot of weirdness going on so far. But this is normal. We're only a few weeks in. These teams that are 3-0 now, these teams, mathematically they're likely to still be a playoff team, but it's very early. There's more games now. When you have 17 games, unlike certain sports, you have a long trek. This is not college football. You have a long trek to try to make up ground here. So a lot can change, and we'll see. I mean, the Steelers 3-0 with Justin Fields, but yet Mike Tomlin today said that he was not willing to name Justin Fields the legit starter, the QB1. He literally said he's not going to give the media what they want. He's going to wait another week to even decide. And Russell Wilson's, the words were preparing to get on the field. To get on the field, they haven't lost with Justin Fields, who's looking better and better each week. So you have that going on too, because their schedule's also going to get into divisional play when Russell Wilson could get healthier. So are you going to put him in during divisional play where it's rougher defenses coming at you when you're possibly 4-0, 5-0? I wouldn't put it past Mike Tomlin, because that was the initial plan to start Russell Wilson as the vet. But and there are teams certainly disappointing that we're very concerned with so far earlier this year. The 49ers would be another one to add it to Dallas, but we will see. Who would have thought the Buffalo Bills would be better without Stephon Diggs, because Josh Allen right now looks to be MVP of the league, looks better than he was before. And the Bills look like one of the best teams in football, when we were talking months ago and I wrote about this too, they may have a year where they miss the playoffs. It looks like the end of the line for their window. Not the case so far, but it is still very, very early in the season. So nobody has anything nearly locked up yet, but a lot has gone on only a few weeks in so far.
Buffalo throttles Jacksonville, and
throttles the word. Yes.
And that's, I kind of want to focus for a moment on those 0-3 teams, because they're all 3 0-3 teams are all in the AFC, none in the NFC. Jacksonville, Tennessee, Cincinnati. Tennessee's kind of like, okay, I get that. It's they eschew Malik Willis in the just at the end of the preseason there. He goes to Green Bay.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, he's winning a game, and then 3 weeks later, he's going back to Tennessee and winning there. Will Levis is in a world of trouble, was sacked 8 times on Sunday against the Packers.
They lost Derrick Henry, though. I mean, it looks like that's kind of it for Tennessee being a contender for a while. They're in rebuild mode.
So that kind of tracks the whole firing Mike Vrabel. Nobody, thought that made any sense. And so here we are with the Titans. The Jaguars and Bengals are interesting, and they're not two sides of the same coin, but they're interesting and similar in a couple of ways. So Jacksonville, we're trying to figure out if Trevor Lawrence, as a top overall draft pick, is there going to be anybody that can sustain and figure out can this work with him? They made the playoffs. They did. They beat Dallas at home
ahead of schedule
2 seasons ago.
Yeah,
ahead of schedule. Doug Peterson, everything comes back here. He and Jacksonville 0-8, dating back to last November now.
Yeah, and this is the head coach that won his Super Bowl. This is a Super Bowl winning head coach. This is not everyone trying to prove themselves. Doug Peterson has proven himself. But and it also feels like, are the Jaguars building the team around Trevor Lawrence the right way? Because who's explosive there?
Right.
I'm waiting.
Yeah.
Crickets. So they're building the team the same way Jacksonville always builds the team for the last 30 years, which is defense, do enough on the ground, quarterback maybe can be the athlete. Trevor Lawrence has been more of an athlete than they've ever had there, and he is the best quarterback they've had there in a long time. They're looking to sustain someone with a franchise guy, but I'm not sure he's being put in a position to have full-on success. That is conversely the other 0-3 team that's supposed to be a contender that normally is with their QB when he's healthy, and Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Now, Joe Burrow is doing all he can do. All he can do. 300 plus yards, 3 TDs, no picks, very efficient quarterbacking, 70 plus completion percentage. Nothing wrong with his play, even though some of the national media claimed he didn't do enough. I mean, again, if he has to do more than that, then you're literally saying he has to be the MVP of the league to go anywhere. They do have weapons. They lost some, but they do still have weapons there. Chase came back. They do have weapons on that team. The defense has been kind of what it's been, but now appears to be even worse. They're not getting the takeaways they got during the Super Bowl run, and they could easily be 0-4. And at that point, the math is staring you right in the face that they're basically out of it with a healthy Joe Burrow, despite how he's playing. It feels like the Bengals kind of have built the team the right way. They built a quality team that won an AFC recently, but it's still not working out for them. Whereas I don't think the Jaguars have built the team the right way. But the Bengals are a head scratcher because as much as Daniels is emerging and Washington looks like they finally got something going,
it shouldn't have looked that easy for Washington.
Well, the Bengals also shouldn't be 0-3, and they shouldn't be looking at 0-4. I mean, they should win some of these games. And the reason why they weren't good last year, you can point to Burrow's injury. When he's healthy, they went to a Super Bowl. They were in the AFC Championship game. They've always been a contender with him. In fact, even going back to college, he's never been on a losing team when he's healthy. So it's not him, but the defense looks so bad that they're in a world of trouble. The Steelers haven't lost. The Ravens have Lamar Jackson as they're kind of figuring it out now with the recent win. And the Browns are an absolute dumpster fire, but that's a little bit more expected with Watson being so bad so far. And the Bengals are supposed to contend for that division, if nothing else. And that does not appear to be the case.
In Cincinnati, you've kind of got the weird contract stuff hanging around. So T. Higgins is back on a franchise tag, but he obviously wanted kind of a different deal. Jamar Chase is playing, but also wanted a new deal. And so,
but they're playing. Are they not trying?
They're playing. Yeah.
Well, what's the effort then? Because the rumors in the offseason was they were going to hold out and screw the season. They are playing. You would figure if they're playing, they're trying the hardest. They're Pro Bowlers.
Oh,
teams should be good. They are putting points up. See, we're talking about offensive players. The Bengals' problem is on defense, though.
Yeah.
They did
and
score.
And to your point about, does it slide into 0-4 and further? Like, they did.
The schedule's not getting easier as well.
For the first time since the 1940s, it had 0 punts and 0 turnovers in it. So just teams took possession and scored or were turnover on downs. So it's weird because if you keep sliding down that slope, if you're Cincinnati, does that then those guys, if you had a preponderance to stay for Higgins and for Chase, is it now like, okay, this is sliding into such a place that regardless of whether Joe Burrow is my quarterback or not, that I'm willing to go take my talents elsewhere where maybe Cincinnati was the lead favorite to keep me. And now it's just like, we're sliding into a place.
If you're the franchise, you should still want to keep at least Chase. You should want to keep somebody because you have to make the quarterback happy. You have to make sure Burrow's comfortable, or else he's going to want out at some point. And he has clout to argue that and cause drama. But if I'm the Bengals, and they obviously have a very cheap historic owner that is known for being cheap in these situations, which is why it's got to this point. But you still feel like there's a window there. Even if they aren't good this year and miss the playoffs this year, you can chalk last year up to Burrow being hurt. This year, the defense has some problems. You know what you have to do in the offseason outside of resign those guys. You do need to fix the defense. Maybe they won't have the money to do that and resign those guys, but the draft can bring defensive impact players right away. There's a lot of them in college. That is a spot that can have an impact right away. And with Burrow being so freaking young, you got to feel like the window's open. I mean, if the quarterback is on the right side of 30, meaning younger, you can't feel like you're punting an era. So you got to feel like they still feel there's a window there, especially when you look at after this year, the Steelers have to decide on Fields, Wilson, or go back in the quarterback market because they both would need a new contract, whoever's there in the future. Obviously, the Ravens are locked into Lamar Jackson, but there's still a concern on how long that can be with the way he plays. And obviously the Browns got all their money tied up in Watson despite moving things around, and he's not getting it done. So if you are the Bengals, George, do you not think and scratch your head even further, we have the best quarterback situation for the future in the division. How many quarterbacks who are under 30 in the league right now would you rather take than Joe Burrow for the next 10 years? There's not many of them. Not many of them. So you have to feel like if that's the case, you should still be trying to go for it. But with their owner being cheap, and yeah, maybe those players just purely want out. Maybe they're sick of this too. I mean, Burrow's 27 years old. It's not like he's even 29. It's just interesting to be putting those points up. This is a scoring league. This is a scoring era. You put 30 plus up and you're not winning games. It's clear the problem in Cincinnati, but I don't see a fix in sight based on their schedule, based on what's going on in the division, and based on what's coming up. But outside of those teams that have disappointed so far, are there any teams that so far are winning that you're not only surprised by them winning, but you think they're going to sustain the level of winning throughout the entire season?
My Green Bay Packers? No.
So you didn't expect them to do anything this year? I mean, with Jordan,
not after because
after
that's a lie. I'm kidding. Actually, friend of the program.
I would not have thought they would win with Malik Willis. Yes, I agree.
Friend. I had to talk friend of the program, Brett, off the ledge immediately after the injury. I'm like, it doesn't look good.
You were not predicting Malik Willis would have more than one win. There's no way. I'm not buying that.
No, but I called the Indianapolis one. He's like, there's no way. And I was like, Anthony Richardson, I believe this in my heart. God bless Anthony Richardson. He's only played 18 or 19 games of legitimate professional and college football now, both with injuries and the amount of time he did not start at Florida. He started a season at Florida and then left. And combine that with the rest of the Colts that still need to come together. And I'm like, Green Bay can scratch out 17 to 20 points. And
the schedule was easy without him. And then Tennessee's not hard.
Yeah. I was like, I think they'll beat Indianapolis and the same thing. They're going.
But I mean, most people would have thought Malik Willis would throw picks and would have growing pains and wouldn't be good. I mean, I still don't think Malik Willis is the future NFL starting quarterback in this league.
All of that correct.
That was the hype 2 years ago.
All of that correct, especially with the hype 2 years ago. I generally am not a fan of that prototype of the Trey Lance. You know, he's probably going to end up going the way of Trey Lance, where it's just like, all right, you can be a backup on a team, but that's, no, he's not a legitimate starter for anybody, even though regardless of how he was drafted. But Matt LaFleur game planned this to, it's like, listen, we're going to screen pass to Josh Jacobs. We're going to put the ball in your hands to run, had a rushing touchdown, ran at key moments.
Yeah, that's what you have to do with a young QB.
And the game plan suited him so dang well that he did not have to go out there and make decisions that he either was not comfortable with or throws that he couldn't make. But
it depends on when Love comes back, though, because I do think eventually this is going to catch up to Malik Willis and the Packers. They're going to have harder games.
And it may very well be this week at home, thankfully, against Minnesota, against the top team in the division right now. So
you could argue Minnesota's
your litmus test
run out soon.
Yeah, exactly. Sure, yeah. But I think
when you play Detroit, when you play Minnesota, when you get in the division, even though the Bears have kind of been a dumpster fire so far as well, that's still a better offense and figuring what's around Caleb Williams. That could be a game that whoever makes the least mistakes wins.
Yeah,
I would have a hard time buying the stock in Malik Willis for the entire.
Oh yeah. I'm being facetious there. But Packers and the entire NFC North, their division they play in the other conference this year, if you have not guessed by now, is the AFC South. So they will get Jacksonville, game that I'll be at later on, as will all the other teams later on down the line, including the Texans too. So you do get to hopefully stockpile some wins, and Green Bay's already won 2 of their games against the 4 AFC South teams. But and you mentioned the Steelers thing isn't that maybe it's surprising that they're 3-0 based on how they barely could register points in a first down until this week.
They've only allowed 26 points though. They've only allowed
exactly. And if it was
historic so far, how long
if it was like
that up, I don't know.
Yeah, and if it was like script how the Steelers are going to win, I was like, it's probably going to be ugly, and they're going to kick some field goals. Or they kick 6 of them,
so 6, and then
they
beat the Chargers, but Herbert goes down early in that game. He was banged up entering the game, so they face Herbert, who's injured, And Kirk Cousins is a former Pro Bowler, but that was his first game with his new team. They're figuring things out. They do look a lot better now. If they would have played like they did against the Chiefs, against the Steelers, they would have beat the Steelers, even though they didn't beat the Chiefs.
It's surprising, but also not that surprising because it looks like the Pittsburgh Steeler football. It would put it this way, Mike. If they were 3-0 and they won each game like 35-14, then I would be surprised. But they're 3-0, and it's like, okay, like I could have penciled in a loss in the Atlanta game if Kirk pulled away to pull a rabbit out of a hat, and they're 2-1. They still be leading the division at 2-1. But
and then you face a rookie QB in Bo Nix. I mean, Mo Nix made some mistakes. The second they had momentum off a long pass, he threw a pick that was basically anybody could have caught. That was right there to a Steeler defender. So the schedule's going to get harder. They have this stupid quarterback controversy they're dealing with. Justin Fields has been good enough. I do think he should stay as a starter, but he's not been nearly great. And there's still issues there. They're still having trouble getting George Pickens fully unlocked. It almost looked like Calvin Austin became the number one in that last game. That's not going to work. Obviously, George, if Calvin Austin is getting the number one target, George Pickens is eventually in a long season going to get upset, and there's going to be drama there. I'm just waiting for it. There's no way he's going to be fine with not being the guy. And he should be talent-wise. George Pickens is a beast talent-wise, but they're still having problems fully unlocking him. And how long does the defense keep this up? So a lot of questions still remain there, but fortunately for them, they do have the bumper now, and they'll get into divisional play, and those are always swing games. So when you start 3-0, if they go 500 in the divisional games the next 6 weeks and kind of basically just go 3-3 and whatever they have coming up here, and there's divisional games mixed in there, they're still in good shape overall record-wise. So when you have a solid start, that is the advantage. But anybody else besides those teams, I mean, people thought early on in the year it could be the Chargers, but then Herbert obviously has got hurt.
Number one with a bullet that is truly the biggest surprise, the one that I am most surprised by, is New Orleans. And even in the loss, I'm still, surprised.
Yeah, Carr's getting it done this year. People thought last year maybe was the year for Carr. Yeah. This year, Carr's giving you the Michael Jackson celebration, getting fined and not even caring. Like he is giving you the swag. Yeah.
92 points in their first 2 games. And then aforementioned 3 points through 3 quarters, but led the game 3-0 deep into the fourth at home. And still had a chance to win that. And eventually Philadelphia wins by 3 at the end, 15-12. But no, that's legitimately surprising. And to do it, they beat the Panthers. To go into Dallas, and again, we'll figure out if Dallas mounts a comeback last. A whole nother story with Baltimore, who, is leading that game 28-6 at some point. And Dallas mounts a comeback to be in contention in the final 2-3 minutes of the game. And we'll see where they
Baltimore
land.
Has some problems defensively.
But to put up 44 on that defense, which was Dallas had a good defense last season. They gave up. They got beat around a couple of games, including in the playoffs to Green Bay. But that was a good defense with key playmakers on it last season. And to go into Arlington and to put that number up is big. So Falcons coming up, Chiefs coming up for the Saints. That's it's a Monday night game in Kansas City for the Saints. That will kind of be, where the rubber meets the road there to see how they can perform in that environment. But no, that's truly surprising because I think you would have picked the Saints below the Buccaneers and the most people, I would say the Falcons and then the Buccaneers. I'm not surprised by the Buccaneers. Like that's running real good with Baker down there another year. So
Baker last year, they're just kind of carrying on. Now the South does have a different champion pretty much every year. And most people would have thought that would maybe be Atlanta emerging because you bring in Kirk Cousins, you have the veteran QB. When he's healthy, it's 4,000 yards every year.
And the assets that he has, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, like they've got, and it's not all for naught. You're only a game back right now if you're Atlanta, and you've lost that, as we mentioned, that tight one to Pittsburgh, and this tight one to the Chiefs. Both were games that were winnable. So there's things they can figure out there and get it together.
Yeah, I do think the Falcons are going to have a special year. I do think Kirk Cousins is going to have a great year. I do think they're going to be a contender in a wide open division, and if not the division, they're going to be vying for a wild card. I do think Atlanta's going to be a playoff team, but we will certainly see as it all map out. Are you worried about the 49ers now with Christian McCaffrey also being hurt? Yeah, they have been that team that has been right on the precipice. They have multiple Super Bowl appearances. They haven't been able to win. They still are very young at multiple spots. Brock Purdy's, going to have to get money, but he's still very young. There's still George Kittle's getting older, but there's still tons of weapons there. Mm-hmm. But now they're dealing with Christian McCaffrey being hurt. They did bring back Ayuk, who did not end up becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler, and they certainly could still use him. and the Steelers have a better record than the 49ers right now. But what are you bringing people back for if you're not going to win anyway? It feels like the Niners window's closing, and people thought it was going to close because they were going to lose players. Ayuk would leave, etc. That didn't happen yet. They're still not winning, and now they're dealing with injuries. And even though Brock Purdy is young and has had maybe better numbers than people give him credit for the last few years as kind of a game manager where they've been able to win, he can't elevate and overcome all of that. So I just don't see how, especially with the Rams kind of figuring things out. We didn't even mention, because they're the most underrated team in football the last 3 years. And so far this year, I already mentioned the quarterback leading the way. It is WVU alum Geno Smith and the Seahawks. They haven't lost. The wins are not pretty. He threw 2 picks. They got to overcome things. They don't dominate anybody.
They beat some bad teams. Yeah.
but it's the same thing.
But the wins are the wins.
The wins are the wins, because now you're getting into the division where they have a cushion. They're going to drop games, but they have a cushion by having this 3-0 start so far. And Matthew Stafford and the Rams have proven it before, even though they took a dip a little bit the last couple of years. So if you're the Niners, I don't know where you fit into that equation to even be anywhere higher than third in the division to even get in the playoff picture now when you're losing your best player for weeks. And I'm not saying Arizona's any good, but they actually look to have a semblance. I'll give you a funny term here.
They're gonna be more competitive than 3 wins.
Well, right. It looks like what Arizona has is they have a concept of an offense, is what Arizona finally has. They didn't have it before. So with James Conner and Kyler Murray slinging it, and he looks healthy.
Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, and of course, Marvin Harrison Jr., who a receiver can right away have an impact. He's doing that. He looks to be an immediate Pro Bowl type receiver for the years to come. So Arizona looks to be a team that maybe not defensively, although Dante Stills is there and he's getting sacks, and they look better defensively too. I don't think they're a playoff team this year, George, but they're so young. Next year, I think there's going to be people starting to pick them, especially when the Niners have fallen off and how young Arizona is. They're kind of maturing together. All of those key spots, they're around the same age, and they are just fun to watch. They're kind of explosive. They can be, certainly with Murray to Marvin Harrison Jr. They feel like a team that is ready to start making a run, and they might be able to outscore teams at some point in the future to get some upsets. I would not want to play them towards the end of the year once they really start figuring this out together. But maybe they even crawl in. Maybe they're this year's Detroit. I mean, I'm not predicting it, but they're playing that way, win or lose, that they are very competitive in every game, and they're going to stay that way. I do believe that about them. They're kind of what people thought maybe the Raiders would do that I still don't buy. But I think Arizona is maybe 100%. That team. And the other team that everyone talks about on every single show that I guess we got to bring up here, Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. Now, obviously last year was a mulligan with him out 6 plays into the year, or a couple plays in the year, but he's playing now. They're not setting the world on fire. His numbers aren't crazy. This is not going to be a 50 MVP for him, but it looks like now they're kind of finding their footing a little bit.
Doing the things that he needs to do to make that car work.
Yeah, I mean, of course, he went on McAfee and said that if you need him to throw 400 yards, he easily could do it, basically. So he disagrees that he has to do this. But they're doing this anyway because he is older. And the defense was great last year and almost got him into contention without him. So now that they're there and you have Sauce Gardner and company, they look like they have a legit team. The Bills are winning too. But if you look at that division, the Jets also have an absolute chance to make a run.
I want to hit real quick on San Francisco. A friend of mine was, looking at lines and everything, betting, is like, what do you think here and there? And Los Angeles, the Rams were a home dog, and I'm like, home dog in Rams house? Rams house? Who's that? Rams house? Granted,
look at those red jerseys though.
Rams house, but it's 98% 49er fans.
It was 49ers house is what it was.
But he's like, oh, this is injured, and I was like, they're both injured. Do I want Kyle Shanahan with the guys he's missing and Brock Purdy, or do I want Sean McVay with the guys he's missing and Matthew Stafford? And I'll take, with no disrespect to Kyle Shanahan, I'll take Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford, who's been in the league 15 years and has a whole bunch of records to make that work. And it took a comeback. And then there's the other problem, is that San Francisco had 14-0 lead in the first quarter, and a 10-0 lead in the fourth quarter, right? And or 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. And
yeah, I could ask you how good are the Rams, because they're older and they kind of figure out ways to win now, but they look like this era is kind of closing. Darnold retires.
Yeah. No, I believe that the era is closing, but I also
Darnold,
in this, head to head here, and San Francisco, the people that San Francisco had out were more important to them than the people the Rams had out.
Yeah.
And I trust Sean McVay, even though they're both very excellent coaches and coordinators. I expect Sean McVay to do a better job of navigating a situation where he's got a game plan for people, key cogs in his offense that aren't there, than I do Kyle Shanahan, especially with Matthew Stafford.
I agree, although the counter would be going into the game, and it didn't work out this way.
Mm-hmm.
Shanahan has proven, including Super Bowl runs. I mean, he went to Super Bowl with the quarterback that wasn't Brock Purdy. Right, so he's been able to pretty much take anybody to a conference championship game. He was doing it with Garoppolo. Now he's doing it with Brock Purdy. So he's probably going to argue that you throw anyone under center, and I think Purdy's better than those guys.
Sure.
But he could argue behind closed doors, you throw anyone under center, and I'm going to take him far.
It shows how much that 49ers offense is kind of interlocking part type of thing with when you don't have Christian McCaffrey, when you don't have Debo, whereas the Rams missing Puka Nacua, and here's Kyron Williams, here's Tutu Atwell, here they're just able to make, and they get a big punt return on special teams, so they're able to make things work.
The Rams are just Chinese water torture, though, and that's what they did last year. They just dinked the hell out of it. And it's like what old school Brady and Belichick with the Patriots. They just dink and dunk the hell out of it, and that's why when you're with the Rams, whether it's Cup or Puka, you just can dink and dunk your way to these big numbers and put points on the board with a future Hall of Fame quarterback dink and dunking you down the field. It's not going to be the greatest show on turf like it was for the Rams decades ago, but certainly now when you look at the landscape, they're in there, and the Niners look to certainly be in trouble. Now, going back to the open, though, for me, as much as Dallas looks like they're going to be in trouble and they look exposed a little bit.
That's so interesting.
The division's still very much open. Because, the Giants won a game, but they're not going to go anywhere. Nobody believes in them. The Eagles should be good, but they have
Washington sustain it.
They have a lot to prove still. And Washington, while they look good, they're facing a really bad defense in Cincinnati. Daniels is a rookie.
Still,
he's going to go through problems. So if all of those things happen, you're the Cowboys. You have the veteran. You do have a coach that won a ring before, even though it's been a while. You should be able to win the swing games. You should be able to figure things out down the stretch. And as much as they usually, and I'm sure McCarthy will have some decision that'll suck, Dak won't play well in January, George. Generally speaking, that doesn't occur until January. They won 12 games 3 straight years. So, people can make fun of how much they disappoint in the postseason, but they usually by far are the class of this division year in and year out, with the exception of when the Eagles won a championship. Other than that, and when they went to another one, but other than that, during the regular seasons, the Cowboys usually are the class here, and it feels like the division is still very much theirs for the taking, even though they've looked exposed so far. But they got to be better defensively, which you wouldn't figure would be their problem so far. That's why we're seeing some weirdness. I mean, there was even a brief spurt. I saw someone write a story about this. A week 1 into the season, are the Patriots good? I don't think so. I'm not buying it, but they flirted with a little bit of people being able to write that the first week or so of the season. So that's how we've seen some odd things. And I also do think the Chargers can be a contender if Herbert can stay healthy. To bring them up again, if he can stay healthy. People thought maybe they're a year ahead of schedule with Harbaugh, but J.K. Dobbins has looked great on the ground. He always is great when he's healthy. If he can stay healthy, and if Herbert can stay healthy, and that's question marks now, I do think they can ground and pound you Michigan style, and it'd be a better recipe to win games than what they were doing before, relying pretty much all on Herbert to have a fantasy football day.
We're waiting to see that Harbaugh identity come into play and actually decide a game here at some point for them. If that's,
I mean, the first 2 weeks they were doing the Harbaugh Michigan thing. They was ground and pound. It was all J.K. Dobbins, very efficient running with a lot of yards, and Herbert didn't have to do too much, even though he's an elite quarterback. Now with him hurt, though, I don't know who else can come in that can help them and can even manage a game to his level. But if he gets back in there and you have to scheme for him, I do think if they win, he's more of a game manager this year. I don't think, and I have him on a fantasy team, but I don't think he's a fantasy juggernaut that he was years ago. And it might finally be a better recipe for the Chargers to win games. But it feels like the NFL season just started, but yet a lot has already happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're nearing the quarter pole. So there you go. Let's take a quick timeout here on the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show. When we come back, we will flip the script to the other side of the football ledger, and that is the world of college football, and take a peek at the latest top 25 and see how things are shaking out here. Is it time to dismantle the ladder of the climb, or did the Kansas win get people back on? We'll hit on that. We're trying to spend too much time on it. We got a lot of opinions on the West Virginia Mountaineers and other teams across this great land of college football. That is next here on the HBS. Do a note real quick. Where's my pencil?
40-20.
Thank you. And I'm gonna run and grab a Coke out of the fridge.
Okay. Not sponsored by Coke, but we should be.
We're not. No. They got me.
Although
they
I do prefer Pepsi over Coke and Diet Coke over Diet Pepsi for a hot take.
Okay.
Pepsi over Coke, Diet Coke over Diet Pepsi.
You've always been, a original Pepsi man, but yeah.
But Diet Coke. I can knock
Coke.
out Diet Coke over Diet Pepsi is trash. Diet Coke over Diet Pepsi, but Pepsi over Coke. And I can drink a Coke. I like Coke, but Pepsi is the way to go. I can chug a whole liter. I'm not doing that any further, but I can. I don't have the metabolism I did in my early 20s, so I would have knocked that out. But
now, see, my trick is that I'm a big Coke Zero fan. Big fan of Coke Zero.
Coke Zero, yes. I just very rarely have it at the house, but Coke Zero is actually my press box drink of choice. It's water or Coke Zero. I do enjoy Coke Zero. Yes.
So
I do absolutely like Coke Zero. Sure.
They got me with the ads, and I went and got this Oreo one, and I'm like, okay.
No, I don't think the Oreo one's where it's at. I'm not.
It's not bad. It does have. It's got the faint chocolatey taste.
That's unnecessary. That's unnecessary. I mean, I get the 0 calories.
I would agree with you that it's unnecessary,
but when you're throwing Oreo in. Yeah, I mean that's doing too much.
It's got a creamy cookie-y type of taste.
It's doing too much, and it's aspartame. Probably it's not. No, it's not. It's not where it's at. But
Sucralose. Oh yeah, aspartame. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Aspartame's not where it's at. Yeah. No. See. Okay.
That's why I was one off. I'm not going to buy it.
I'm glad I ruined it for you now, because aspartame is if you're.
I know. I just wanted to try it.
I don't know. I don't think I'm going to make that purchase. No.
The ads get me. Welcome back inside the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show. George the Howitzer Gerbo.
Mike the Buzz-saw Asti.
Let's get into the world of college football. It's had some wackiness. Not you got even the ancillary side thing. Wheel keeps on spinning. A conference realignment. The Pac-12 now.
Yeah, Pac-12 suing the Mountain West now.
Pac-12 suing the Mountain West. I heard Utah State's in, so they got maybe 8 teams, maybe more, maybe less. Who knows? We'll figure that out. Right now, there's only 2 of them.
Mixed messages on Gonzaga, but they need to have so many football teams by 2026, and obviously Gonzaga doesn't bring a football team.
Exactly. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. We've not had too many shakeups in the top 25 and the top 10. Notre Dame, of course, lost a few weeks ago to Northern Illinois, and that sent them plummeting down the rankings.
I jinxed them too, because I wrote about. They had a wide open path.
You did.
They had a wide open, but it's true. We even talked about it on this show. If they would have beat these group of 5 teams, they would have had Louisville later in the year. They're Notre Dame. They're a darling. If they would have one loss and it be to a top 25 team, even if it's 25th, or even if it's a normal ranked team like a Louisville or Florida State, they probably would beat, because they've been so bad this year. They would walk in the playoff. There's no way even a 2-loss Notre Dame team would have flirted with top 15 and maybe top 12. Yes, the schedule was easy this year, but they had it all in the driver's seat and they blew it. Now I don't see how now they could even get it. They'd have to dominate everything, but they had it all in front of them, and I did jinx them, by the way. 100%
the
jinx them.
Where I want to focus on the Big 12, not just because it's the conference that you cover, but mainly because that's the one where we've actually had some kind of, I don't want to call it tectonic shifting, but we've actually had some shifting in the lay of the land there. The SEC has dominated the top 10. Texas has leapfrogged up there into the top spot after their win last week.
Right.
The Big Ten, same thing. Ohio State still holds down 3. Oregon and Penn State are both top 10 teams. Michigan beat Southern Cal. Those two flip, but they're both still top 15 teams. So this, the Big Ten teams that were at the top of their conference are there.
Now you could argue those teams haven't got into the meat of their schedule yet, though.
And they haven't got into the
meat of their schedule. They haven't played anybody yet. I mean,
100%
have the Power 4 win over WVU, but other than that, they're going to get in. And they had a flirt with, if Bowling Green would have beat them, that would have really blown everything up.
Points. Yes,
but it didn't happen, and we will now start seeing, but mostly figuring that
Michigan plays a very Michigan game and only goes for less than 40 passing yards, like they did a whole bunch of times last season, and they're able to come back and hold on against Southern California. So, but other than that, not too much in the other shakeups. The Big 12, a little bit all over the map here. So Utah has held serve and is at number 10. We've had BYU has vaulted into the rankings now. They're undefeated after
they were real bad last year. Real bad.
Yeah, they were real bad last year. I think they were. You would know better than I, but I think they were picked either 15th or 16th in this new conference.
I mean, it was at the bottom. West Virginia mollywopped them a year ago in Morgantown. So they were not a contender last year, but BYU, Cincinnati, who I also thought was going to be a bottom feeder, picked towards the end.
Cincinnati looks a little bit better than Texas Tech was another one. People thought
they get Corleone back, and they look like they lost the game to Pitt, but Cincinnati does, outside of blowing the game to Pitt, they look like they're a contender. I don't believe they are, by the way. I think they're going to fade. I cannot imagine that Cincinnati is going to hang throughout this entire season when everybody and their brother thought they would be not even a bowl team. I mean, they were predicted to win 4 games. They're doing the West Virginia thing of 2023 so far. We'll see. But I'm not surprised the Big 12 is chaotic, because I do agree, or I do believe, that the Big 12 is deeper than, say, the ACC. You could even argue depth with the other conferences at the top in the SEC and Big 10, even though they're clearly the better conferences. They're clearly going to send all the teams to the playoffs, certainly the at-large bids. The Big 12 could argue overall depth, overall teams who are going to be bowl eligible, all of that. But that's also going to be a problem if there's really any elite teams outside of Utah. And when you have so much depth, you're going to beat up on each other. So that's kind of what's happening.
Iowa State still holding serve at 3-0. Their toughest game, they're at Houston, which is another team that's supposed to be picked to be in the bottom of the conference. They're in Morgantown in T-minus 2 weeks. So
Rocco Beck goes to Morgantown, and they're going to celebrate Anthony Beck finally.
Celebrate his dad there. Sophomore Rocco Beck has done extremely well there in Cyclone Country. So it's really, same thing with West Virginia, who's now 1-0 in the conference, even though they had their first losing non-conference schedule in a season in 20 years.
And you blow the game to Pitt, and I saw some fans talking about, after the Kansas comeback, fans were saying, I wish you could flip these two. Not really. You don't want to lose to Pitt, and you don't want to blow a game against your rival, but they're 1-0 in conference play. Unless you think you're going to be, the only way that would be better is if you're an SEC or Big Ten team and you're really looking at large bid. In all reality, West Virginia's path to get in is winning the conference. And right now, it's a wide open conference. They're 1-0 in conference play. They have a bye coming up so they can heal up while these other teams are playing. So they're not going to get behind the 8 ball. And yes, they're going to have a tough road going on the road. Oklahoma State coming up, and they will play Kansas State and Iowa State. They don't play Utah, though. After that stretch where you have those 3 likely ranked teams, even if you just win one of them, or even if you lose all of them, George, it's not out of the question they win 4 or 5 in a row to end the year, because then the schedule gets a lot easier. And even if Cincinnati is good, West Virginia destroyed them a year ago. And I think there's a lot of fraudulent teams towards the end of that schedule, and UCF and Baylor, etc. They could go the other way. West Virginia could lose those games, but West Virginia is in the race because of the Kansas win. If they would have lost that, the vibes would be so bad they probably would mentally be out of it. But winning it is kind of pick things up. I mean, Jordan Leslie's not going to be fired. He's in the press box. He's coaching the Oklahoma State game. Neil Brown, I don't think he's on as hot of a seat as the fans want him to be on. I really don't.
It's a good point to make. Yeah,
it might. I mean, if he loses all 3 of the ranked games and they go 0-3 and they're 1-3 in conference play, then I could see. But I think if he wins one of them and then they go on a run with an easier schedule, that might save his job, because then they could still get to 8 wins. But nonetheless, there's nobody in the Big 12 that is totally out of this race as we are speaking right now, unless maybe Houston.
You were very measured after the Pitt game, saying like, listen, I know this is bad, but the season's still in front of them. They just got to win conference games. And everybody called you a liar and a heretic and said, bleep you, Mike Asti. And you're like, listen,
I don't recall. I don't recall that, but
no, I know I'm exaggerating there. And you're like, listen, I'm not saying it's great. I'm just saying they win the conference games they need to win, and they can still be in play. And here you are, where again,
well, I said in the off season, would you rather win the rivalry games or win the conference games? And people wanted to win the rivalry games, and I was saying that makes no sense. Yeah. Winning the conference games is better, and if they do that, it is better. But
and the upside down nature of,
and you wouldn't figure you would get up from the way you lose to Pitt and then win the next game when you had an 11-point deficit after a weather delay. There's only a few minutes left. You would not figure you would come back and win that game. By doing so, it does change the vibes a little bit. But yeah, I mean, bringing reality and realism and logic to certain fans just doesn't work.
And but just the upside down nature in this kind of stunted round robin is going to help West Virginia, where BYU, who is supposed to be again picked at the bottom of this conference, gets the win, the upset win in Provo. You've got Utah, who
West Virginia doesn't play them, by the way. Also,
West Virginia doesn't play them, but they beat Oklahoma State, who West Virginia does play, to saddle Oklahoma State with a conference loss. So that's helpful in a small way. Central Florida is 3-0 and was nearly on the outside, just on the outside of the poll with a conference win. Now, you mentioned Cincinnati. We saw what Colorado did on a Hail Mary against Baylor, a game Baylor should have won and did not. That might be helpful down the line for them to have that conference loss in there, even though they're probably not a good team. Texas Tech, I think, was supposed to be 16th in the league on the poll, if I remember the poll correctly. They're 3-1 and have a conference win already. So Arizona, who was
it's hard to believe in them. I still don't believe in Arizona, but I do think they'll beat West Virginia at home. That's just such a long road trip. I always pencil that in as a loss. But you have a lot of tiebreakers that could come into play here.
Oh yeah,
I do think it's weird, and I do think the Big 12 should fix this. At least get on par with the ACC, who's a similar conference, and this would fix the out-of-conference schedule debate. Go to 8 conference games instead of 9. Then you would have 4 out-of-conference games. Then you could play 2 rivals. You could still play a group of 5. You could still play an FCS and get the money. And you'd have easier math for all of these issues in conference play and less chance of all these tiebreakers.
The odd
having
number
9 games, you could have and one of the tiebreakers actually is win percentage in common opponents in conference play. So because West Virginia does not play a lot of the other teams that may vie for this conference title, if they go 1-0 against the common opponents, they win the percentage.
That's helpful. Yes.
So I mean, that is I would more than support how that's unfair if that would occur, but that is currently the rules. The rules are actually benefiting them in a weird way. And you also have to remember, non-conference common opponents like Pitt doesn't count. It's only common opponents in the conference. And for people that aren't aware, I've been trying to let everybody know, but for anyone who's still not aware, every other conference in conference realignment, when they had out-of-conference games scheduled a decade ago, but then the teams were in the same conference, like Tennessee and Oklahoma, for example,
canceled
the
immediately.
Big 12 did not do that. So you had teams that it might appear they're playing 10 conference games because they've already played conference teams back in week 2. Those games did not count and do not count for the conference standings. If they were previously scheduled, everyone's going to have 9. No one will have 10.
The Utah Baylor game in Utah Baylor game in week 2 was not a Big 12.
It's not a Big 12 game. That does not count for the Big 12. That will not count as a common opponent. That will not count for a tiebreaker. That literally only counts for overall record. And the overall record thing will be the one thing that could hurt West Virginia, because obviously they're 1-2 out of conference play. But that eventually could come into play. But it is just a freaking wide open Big 12. The one thing that I think has happened, which is the negative of being so deep, And I do think this is also going to be an issue for the ACC if Pitt keeps this up, because their schedule's really easy with North Carolina's coming up for them, and North Carolina just lost to JMU, getting destroyed, bringing up Mollywop again.
Hung the speed limit. Did the Dukes
yeah.
on?
So Pitt could be in a driver's seat there. It could be either be Pitt or Clemson, or obviously Miami, who's a top dog right now in the conference. They do appear finally to be back. If not Clemson or Miami, you're then looking
Louisville's
at
floating around there.
And Louisville's floating around. But it looks like when you look at those 4 teams and look at the out-of-conference schedule, Pitt, if West Virginia fades, then Pitt's not going to have a great one. Where's the quality win? They need to root for those teams. But nonetheless, and then you look at the Big 12 kind of cannibalizing itself, regardless of what West Virginia does. And if Utah figuring to win the conference, and Colorado's kind of been hot and cold, and they're literally storming the field for barely beating a team that you figure at that program they should have an easier time with how much they talk and what Dion says is going to happen, that it's very likely that the conference champion from the ACC and the conference champion from the Big 12 is going to be it for those conferences. I find it hard to believe there's going to be an at-large path for any of these teams. I mean, maybe if the only way there's a scenario, George, here's the only way.
The SEC is just going to gobble up a lot of those, which is part of the issue.
The SEC is going to gobble up probably 80% of them. The Big 10 will
maybe
get the
gets
rest.
2 to 3. Yeah.
The Big 10 will get the SEC is going to get a lot of them, because you're going to go Texas on down. And then the Big 10 will get a few others, figuring Penn State will be one of those that'll probably be an at-large. Ohio State maybe wins the conference. They'll probably get it, maybe Oregon. Like, they'll get another one. Maybe get 2 more. I don't know if there's really a group of 5 that's legit enough to earn this, maybe Northern Illinois if they keep this up, but are they really going to? So it's going to be a lot of Big 10 and SEC teams. It just will. The only way there's a chance for the Big 12, for example, to get a second team, to get an at-large team for me, is if Utah does not win the conference. If Utah runs the schedule and has 1 or 2 losses max, and then they lose in the conference title game on an upset loss, which could happen the way the conference works, I think Utah may still get in, depending on who they play. And then obviously the conference champ has to get in. But if you have a scenario where West Virginia turns it on and they win the Big 12, that's it. Maybe Utah would be that team in that scenario. But if Utah wins the Big 12, and they just have a regular dominant year, they own the Big 12, and Kansas State has 3 or 4 losses, the Mountaineers fade, Texas Tech appears to be overrated so far.
That's what you have to worry about, is Utah kind of just running away with the automatic bid.
If Utah runs away with it, then I think that's it for them. But if somebody else, so West Virginia, Colorado, or Kansas State, somebody else wins the conference and Utah gets there and loses, then maybe they get there too. But
yeah.
And same thing in the ACC. If Clemson or Miami, one of those 2 ends up winning it, maybe they would get the other, because they probably want to bump Clemson in. So maybe if one wins it, the other one also would get in. But like for a Pitt, I think they pretty much got to almost run this table, because they have a really easy schedule coming up, and there's not going to be many quality wins there. So if they don't win the conference, they need to. And this also I kind of think sucks for college football fans, which I don't think they get. Because after the brawl, I had a lot of Pitt fans, and I mentioned saying, with the new system, I think West Virginia is still good. I hope they win, because we want it to be a quality win. And then after West Virginia was trailing Kansas, they're all making fun of the Mountaineers. It sucks, George. This is not how it works today. If you beat a team, you need to root for that team the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Pitt needs West Virginia to be good.
Quality.
They need a quality win.
The basketball concept of helping your RPI and having having a quad 3 win turn into a quad 2 win, or a quad 2 win turn into a quad 1
and that's exactly why, for example, again, it's a college basketball mentality. Do you notice Pitt is 4-0? They're hanging points on everybody. Eli Holstein looks like the future of the program, and they're not even ranked. Do you know why? You ready? It's Ken Palm. They don't have quality wins. Yeah, they beat up on Kent State. Yeah, they beat up on Youngstown State. But you know what Ken Palm would say if we're in college basketball world? They would say, you're supposed to. We don't bump you for doing what you're supposed to do. And for a win, you're supposed to dominate. So until they do that against quality opponents, and they don't have many again on the schedule, I don't know how they're ever going to bump fully in there.
And let me play off of that that Pitt thing with 2 other 4-0 teams on the Big Ten side of the coin, Illinois and Indiana. which the two
well,
of them
Illinois is about to lose, but yes,
the two of them have not been 4-0
we're
in a
reporting
season.
this. I'm predicting a loss for Illinois.
He's predicting a loss. The two of them not been 4-0 in a season since together since 1910. The one that mirrors Pitt very closely is Indiana, which is 4-0, but has beaten teams like Charlotte and UCLA, and but still 3-9 last season. Kurt Scanetti comes in, brings a whole bunch of people in from JMU. They play Maryland this week. They're a touchdown favorite at home against Maryland, but still no quality wins there on that schedule. Illinois, shout out to them.
Maryland's benefiting as bad as they were earlier in the year. Michigan State actually the people thought they were going to be horrendous. They're now a respectable team.
Aiden Childs can ball.
That's not that bad of a loss, but
yeah, it is still a bad loss.
But figuring both would favor.
Yeah, and then Illinois ranked 19 this week because they beat a common opponent with West Virginia. They beat Kansas when they were ranked, and they end up beating Nebraska.
But now, how good does the Kansas win look? Exactly. Daniels has 7 picks, and if you think West Virginia's overrated, they just beat them, so that takes that win a little bit away. If you're doing a Ken Palm ranking,
the Nebraska one is the big run with how well they started and how well Dylan Raiola played, and they went on the road to Lincoln
Nebraska
and got that win.
Looks good,
So now, you do get Big Ten, actual legitimate good Big Ten Saturday night game. Illinois at Penn State. I don't know if they can make it like a Bowling Green.
So the weather can't make me not be able to get home to watch a game. I thought noon game I'd be able to get there, but no weather delay. I got a bye week, so I'll be able to sit down and hunker down
and watch Big Ten football from Happy Valley. I don't know if they'll be able to make it like a like Bowling Green did, and
I think
just make it interesting. But
the Vegas line has Penn State, I believe, 18.5.
That's big, man.
I'm going to look at this again right now as we're on the show because that's what I saw before and they may not cover that, but I think Penn State wins this game. I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Illinois will cover. Luke Altmaier
18 points right now. 18 points.
Crazy. I think that's
Penn State is favored by 18. That is still there. It could obviously change, but 18. And a lot of the reason
10 touchdowns, leads the Big Ten in touchdown passes after coming in from Ole Miss. So.
And Illinois,
they've got enough talent on offense to make it closer than 18.
They do, except they haven't scored that many points. I mean, they have talent on offense, but they haven't put up a big 30-plus point game yet.
No, so if 29
So if they haven't done that yet, why would they do it against a better defense in Penn State once you get into Big Ten play? Penn State's finding themselves out a little bit here after the bump in the road against Bowling Green. I do think that's an aberration. George, to West Virginia's credit, and again, I think the Mountaineers played really bad against Penn State, way worse than anybody, even Penn State media, thought they would play. I saw everyone's projections. Nobody thought that was going to be like that. But it could be that Penn State is that much better than even last year, because this was the year the recruits were supposed to come into play. This is the 2022 class that was the top 10 class when they're normally top 15. This is the top 10 class now. Drew Aller looks better. Kotelnicki in that offense looks more explosive, more entertaining. It's a more fun offense than what they had last year, even when they won 10 games. So they're trying new things, and it looks like Penn State has more of an opportunity to start blowing out teams rather than barely win or get nipped by teams and not compete. This type of offensive strategy, I'm not saying they're going to win, but this type of offensive strategy could compete against Ohio State. This isn't as much of a Big Ten offense. This is more of a Big 12 offense. Like they're trying to do different things and fun things, and that's what he's bringing from the Big 12. I think it's helping Drew Aller. I do think they have weapons there. They got 2 tight end sets they can run all the time. They still have great running backs, of course. I don't think Illinois can hang with that Penn State offense, and I don't think they're going to be able to do what they've been doing against that Penn State defense. But maybe they don't drop out of the rankings because Penn State is a top 10 team. So if Penn State beats you by a touchdown or two, that going back to Ken Palm and the college basketball comparison, they would then say that's just supposed to be what's going to happen. Like that's just the norm. Penn State is favorite, the whiteout, all of that. So I do think Penn State could end up becoming a really good team, a certain playoff team. They should be a playoff team this year, but
we'll know.
We will see.
they're at Southern Cal in 2 weeks, so we'll have an idea.
Yeah, that'll
then.
be a game they're going to have to really air it out. That's going to be a big
And-
points game, you figure.
And they get the Buckeyes at home, though, at least, because playing on that grass is a little bit different than playing on the turf in Columbus. So so we'll know. Hey, you're going to play in this beautiful weather in the Coliseum. Can the offense still do these things like you're saying, and like they believe it can with Drew Aller there? And then the game against the Buckeyes is probably where the rubber meets the road in terms of their chances to potentially where they could not only playoff, but
even if they lose to Ohio, if they beat USC and lose to Ohio State, they're still in probably.
Oh, they're still in. But if you beat USC and you beat Ohio State, and then you're on track, you're on track to play in Indianapolis in the conference championship game. So that's something they would like. I'm sure they have eyes on being the auto bid, though they're going to have to get past Ohio State. And potentially Oregon in the conference championship game if that plays out like it should.
The only way they're not an at-large team is if
2 losses.
Well, not only do they lose, I think even if they lose both of those games, as long as both those two teams stay ranked, they can argue for it as long as they're impressive in every game.
Fair.
But if they lose both games, they probably are in trouble. And if they get blown out by Ohio State like they normally do, then they're probably in trouble if you add the USC loss in there as well. If you beat USC, then I think they're at least an at-large bid. Maybe they're a 12 seed versus an 8. Maybe they're on the road instead of being at home. But if you get killed by Ohio State and you beat USC, they're not going to lose to anybody else. They're going to coast through the rest of the thing like they normally do. So then they're fine. But George, even if they lose to Ohio State like normal, there's not divisions anymore, so they still could get in there for the Big Ten title game.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying is that, as you're looking at it, if we filter out some of the teams that are up there now, like Illinois and Indiana, and we're looking at Oregon, if they can take care of their business, are on track.
You figure Oregon will be there.
Yeah. So it could be, it very well could be a rematch if you get the Buckeyes and a 1-loss Penn State team if their only losses to Ohio State playing in Indianapolis for the Big Ten title.
Yeah, and then of course, which is why people didn't want the divisions to go away, which I never understood. It doesn't make sense in any other sport, but I guarantee when that happens, you're gonna have people saying, "Why do we have to see this again? I've already seen this team beat that team." Well, like every other sport, that's the regular season. This is the postseason. The two teams who are the best, who may play during the regular season, it's very possible, should play again to determine who's the champion if they remain the best teams. And saying that one team who is clearly the second best team should be moved out of the game to put the fourth best team in just because they've already lost to the first best team makes literally no sense at all. But I have seen very intelligent people who are your doctors and lawyers out there who are arguing this on a regular basis at the end of years. And I cannot wrap my mind around that argument because it doesn't exist in any other sport. The Yankees and Red Sox in the early 2000s, they played 20 times. They were the best two teams in the American League every damn year. They played 20 times a year. Doesn't matter who won more of those games. Nobody ever sat there in 2003 or 2004 in the ALCS and was like, "No, man, the Red Sox shouldn't be here." No, I'm sorry. They already lost more times to the Yankees during the regular season. They should be pulled out of the game and randomly put Cleveland. Now, you might have wanted this to happen. Randomly put Cleveland or one of those teams in the game because we've already seen them lose to the Yankees. What the hell? That was the regular season. So, yes, that's all going to come to fruition now, and maybe that'll still be argued, but at least we don't have the divisions to worry about now. So that the no division format, not playing Michigan, Penn State. If Penn State is not in the playoff this year, then I think James Franklin legitimately is in serious hot water because he has been arguing for the last decade that if they had 12 teams, they would always be in. They would have been in 6 times out of the last 10 years off of the rankings just on what they are in the AP and the college football playoff. There's no excuse. Even if you get killed by Ohio State, you got to win the USC game. You got to do one or the other. They got to get in. They just got to get in. And I do think they will. Now, is there any team besides what we mentioned, like say Tennessee coming off a big win, or even a team further back, maybe in the top 25, that could go from
could vault themselves into the playoff?
Well, I mean, to go from not only vault themselves in the playoff, but be a legit contender, even in addition to Tennessee. I think a team that needs brought up that people are not talking about enough, despite Lane Kiffin being great on social media, is Ole Miss. They are number 5 in the country. I mean, they should walk in.
And they're just hovering there. They're just kind of hovering around and done taking care of their business. But
I mean, he's all out there on social media doing tutorials with his daughter and doing TikTok videos. He's the champion of girl dads. Can he be the champion of the SEC? Do you realize Ole Miss? People think it's an historic program. They have 6 conference titles. They haven't won any since the 60s. They haven't won any since the 60s. It's obviously very hard in that conference with Alabama, Auburn, usually Tennessee. Those teams always at the top. And again, a lot of the time it's Alabama and Georgia, who we just never mentioned because they're just ho-hum Georgia. But is there room for another team like that in one of those big-time conferences to not only squeeze into the playoff picture, but legitimately be a contender to win a national championship based on what they're doing so far in the rankings? They're in position. Can they stay?
It's yes, because it's just handle their business type of thing. They beat Wake Forest so bad that Wake Forest.
But are they good enough to beat the teams
canceled the game
in the SEC? Is what I'm really asking you.
So
because it's not like they're 30th, and if they win those games, they move up. They're 5th. If they win one of those big games in conference play, they're right there. Then
I don't know, but expansion has favored them as well because they've got Oklahoma and Georgia both in Starkville, and they've got LSU at Death Valley, and those are their 3 toughest games in the conference. Now, can I see them slipping up to like South Carolina and Arkansas? Sure, because Arkansas has been playing some good ball. Maybe not if you don't think
I could see them slipping up
it.
Like one of those games you mentioned, and then winning one of the rank. That's what they freaking do all the time. They lose to South Carolina and then they beat LSU or something, and that'll cancel it out. But what do they need to do? You mentioned 3 ranked teams against big time programs.
Yes.
Do they need to win 2 of those 3 to be a perennial top 5 team?
Yes. I don't think they'll go.
Where do they fall if they win one of those 3?
I don't.
I mean, when you think about it, that's still 2 quality losses if we're doing Ken Palm. Those are all quality games.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think they go to Death Valley and win. I think they will beat Oklahoma at home. And then can you knock off Georgia at home
But out of those 4 games, if they only win 2 of them, are they still a playoff team as an at-large?
Mississippi with 2 losses, and the 2 losses are to top 15 at the time they play
quality
ranked teams. Yes, I would agree. So now, unless LSU somehow precipitously falls out of the poll, which I don't expect to happen, but yeah, if you're Ole Miss and
up to one of the other teams,
you're Ole Miss and we're 10-2, and our 2 losses are to probably 2 teams that either A are going to be ranked 15 or higher at the time you played them, and B, at least one of them, Georgia, is going to be in the playoff, then it's going to make it hard to exclude them, as opposed to Penn State, where if Penn State loses to Southern Cal, then it's kind of like, I think, that's not as quality loss, but
you could argue it's more of a must-win than Ohio State, because Ohio State's so good, people will just give them that mulligan. That'll be a quality loss.
Exactly.
But they can't lose. They probably can't lose to USC.
Yeah.
And if they do, they have to be in a close game, and then they probably have to beat Ohio State. It's one or the other.
Correct.
And if they beat Ohio State and lose to USC, that probably will cancel out and they'll get bumped back in as an at-large. But then they would have a lot of pressure on the Ohio State game, which, as we know, it doesn't matter where it's played. They usually don't win that game. And Ohio State spent $20 million in NIL, so they're trying to buy a championship they haven't won in a while, and it does appear that they could be in perfect position to do so. Imagine they lose Marvin Harrison Jr. and then win the national title. That is the NIL world we're living in, but that certainly could happen.
I want to, and to play off of that, I want to give you, is there one team in there that's going that feels, I don't want to, not necessarily fraudulent, but a team there that you're like, oh no, they're gonna trip up? Miami kind of sticks out in that way, just because
we talked about them already. I don't think so, because the ACC is wide open. If they trip up, then Clemson or Pitt is winning that conference.
But they have had the categorical trip up loss in recent seasons where
but how many of them? They usually have 3 or 4 of them. Are they going to have a bunch?
No, but put it this way. Is them on a track of potentially having an undefeated season and being in the playoff? Is it going to get derailed? But they're playing Virginia Tech this week, and Tech has looked good, and they've looked bad, and they've lost to Rutgers, and they were down to Rutgers big, and Rutgers and it came back. Still, that's what Virginia Tech does. They do have to play Louisville. It's their hardest game of the year, but the rest of it is, Syracuse and Florida State and Georgia Tech.
I think here's the thing.
We've seen them lay eggs before. Is Cam Ward, who is legit, who I believe is a legitimate Heisman Trophy contender, is this different now in Mario Cristobal's 3rd season?
Well, what's different is the literal rules are different. If this was last year in a 14 playoff world, then I would not think they are a real contender, even if they have a chance in the ACC, because as we just saw, the ACC champion, the Big 12 champion are not respected in a 4-team playoff world outside of the TCU breaking in, even though they didn't win the conference. When Kansas State won, they weren't even close. When Pitt had their special year with Kenny Pickett, they weren't even close. I do think Miami's going to get tripped up at some point. What I'm saying is
it more than one?
Well, I'm also saying that all they have to do is get to the ACC title game.
Get to Charlotte.
They don't have to be the number 1 seed. They
just have to get to Charlotte.
To Charlotte, and if they
who else can knock them out? Basically,
they win. In order for them to get knocked out, in my opinion, they got to lose 3 times because the conference is wide open. If 2 losses knocks you out, then Pitt is a legit contender because their schedule is so freaking easy.
Yeah. If two losses knock you out, you presume one of them is to Louisville, and that would give Louisville a head-to-head. And then, like you're saying, that means somebody needs to go undefeated in the conference and have 1 loss and a tiebreaker, whether that's Clemson, whether that's Pitt.
Pitt's schedule is the easiest out of all these teams. Pitt out of all these teams, Pitt's schedule is by far the easiest. So they are now I think they're going to get tripped up. Granted, they are really getting benefited by North Carolina having issues. They should be 5-6-0 at some point. Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see if they eventually ever get ranked because, George, Ken Palm's not going to like the North Carolina win. They're not going to like that either. I'm not sure they get in the ranking at 5-0, and then they're going to freak the hell out. And Narduzzi's is going to be a press conference every day because he does 2 a week, by the way. Name me another coach in the country who does 2 a week.
He does 2 a week?
Oh, I'm not. People don't believe me every time I say this before they cover.
When's the second one?
He does on Friday. He does a Knights of the Round Table thing where he's sitting at a literally a round table. He doesn't stand. He's sitting down. All of the hot takes are from the Friday one.
The Knights of the Round Table.
Then he does an earlier one where he's at a podium.
He does too. We used to have a Thursday Zoom with Loxley, and they got rid of that this year. So now we're down to just Tuesdays with Lox. I like Knights of the Round Table. I need to start covering Pitt. That's a lot of good stories if you get a second press conference.
Against Pitt, I did one, not the other. You missed one. You don't need to do both. And I'll tell you, the thing is, the first press conference is basically just recapping the previous game. It's about injuries. You can watch it at home. The second one, that's where the ticket is. You have to pay your way to be at that thing. That's where he made the comment about the mountain men are probably up here. They probably drove up and they're spying on us. The second one, he's very laid back. The second one is the viral clip. But and there are programs who did that during COVID, but not still. And he does 2 in person. They haven't been virtual with 2 at all. It's always been in person with Narduzzi. He likes to talk. Their schedule's easy enough that I'm not sure when Ken Palm's going to like it because they're going to play a North Carolina team that Ken Palm's going to say still they don't like that win. Even if Pitt wins big, they're going to have to win big. But it'll be interesting because you mentioned Miami. Clemson usually loses a game or 2. They always get tripped up. So if they get tripped up, Miami can afford to get tripped up this year, unlike last year or the year before that, because now if you win the ACC, you're in the playoff. If somebody would tell you right now, put money down on the ACC champion, regardless of where they're ranked, who are you saying right now?
Miami.
Well, then they can lose 2 games. Then all they have to do is and Clemson will be the other.
I haven't seen enough dominance. I don't even put Clemson in the conversation yet. but it's Miami or Louisville for me. And it's mainly because I've not seen Louisville play as explosively and
Louisville's
on
going to lose a
offense.
game too. None of these teams are going
and the thing that's held Miami
Clemson,
back
by
in
the
these
way,
last
is
couple
ranked
of seasons
17 in
was
the
how
AP.
good they were. Yeah, the thing that's held Miami back is how inept they were in cases on offense. And with the quarterback.
They had also some bad decisions to lose games, especially last year.
The whole kneel down thing and all that. Yes, absolutely.
But I do also think you're discounting Clemson. I mean, I know they've lost the game.
I am right now.
They are right there with Louisville in the rankings. So the committee and all those voters are clearly saying that if they keep doing the same thing as Louisville, they're going to be right near them in the rankings.
I do have an anti-Clemson biach. I will say that.
I mean, they're right there. It's not like
they're there. I just think there's I think we're looking at we're going on the name and not the actual talent there. So we'll see how that goes for Clemson.
That's how the rankings have always been. And yes, they're still there because Oklahoma is still ranked. Oklahoma right now, do they really deserve to be ranked? They're still there. Kansas State, 23rd.
I'll give you one that in terms of jumping.
Because I do after you do this, I do have one team that has been horrendous that I do want to ask about before we end the show and maybe talk some baseball on what their future looks like. But go ahead.
We mentioned them already tangentially. Iowa State, who I liked in the preseason, just with the way that Rocco Becht has played, and mainly because we're going to look.
They weren't great last year. He played there last year.
But again, he was a freshman last year, right? And they go down, they win that bowl game, ridiculous bowl game in the snow, and it was kind of like, okay, and where a bowl game is the first game of your next season as opposed to the end of your previous season. It kind of felt like that for Iowa State, and mainly because, like West Virginia, the map lays out in front of them very nicely. They don't have to worry about a really truly tough opponent until Thanksgiving. They finish with Utah, who very well manned up is the favorite to win the conference. They have to go to Utah, but it's not until the week before Thanksgiving.
Well, it may also depend on what they do against West Virginia. If West Virginia beats them, then West Virginia is in the driver's seat the rest of the year. If they beat West Virginia, then they maybe are in the driver's seat to be that number 2 team.
Very similar
game, to be that dark horse team. And it's not out of the question because, again, West Virginia's defense has been really, really bad. I think the secondary is still a problem. Rocco Becht's going to put up points. But the offense for the Mountaineers is starting to try to find themselves. And if they I said this on another show, I'll say this here.
West Virginia can score.
It'll depend on how much, this is what you look for in the Oklahoma State game. How much do they go to the 2-minute offense? Because I think what Neil Brown has figured out is the whole offseason conversation on Garrett Green got to have 60% completion percentage, got to be smarter, all of that. I think Neil Brown literally his quote was, I wish he would check down more, but that's not who he is right now. And they won after that quote. I think he's figured out finally that Garrett Green is just never going to be what he said he had to be all through the offseason. That he's just never going to do it. George, he threw 4 picks last year. He has 4 picks as we're speaking.
Yeah.
As we're speaking. I am, again, as much as the defense has been a problem, I will say, been more critical than anybody else covering the program. Garrett Green has not been nearly good enough.
Yes,
nearly good enough.
It's average. It looks like oh, okay, here's a play or two that's like
he was better last year. He was literally better last year. He literally has regressed.
Looks very pedestrian. Part of that, I'll speak for like the online commentary. Part of that is the design. Why don't you if they run a 2-minute?
Are they going to do more of that 2-minute hurry up offense?
If they run a 2-minute offense so well, or an end of game 4-minute offense so well, like they did against Pitt before they lost, like they did against Kansas that they won, why can't you do that? Just run up tempo the rest of the game.
And I'll tell you what Brown said, and this is the reason why. Defense sucks. And he didn't say that, but this is why. He needs
to have the offense on the field.
He said his answer, because we asked him, how much more are you going to do? And I do think they're going to do more. Now, Brown also said he regrets not going into it earlier against Kansas. I do think they're going to do more of it because the reason what I think has happened again, I think he realized Green is who he is. He's not going to ever be Peyton Manning. He can go to all these Manning passing academies. His completion percentage, George, I believe it's 52.6 against FBS competition this year. It's 52.9 last year, and it was great against Albany. But you take them out, it's basically the same. There's yards there. There's more interceptions. The one against Kansas that almost lost the game before the delay. He literally threw it up like he was punting the football. I don't know what was going on there. That was 3 years ago, Garrett Green. He just gets out of himself mentally at times. I think Brown has figured out, because when they go in the 2-minute, what their game plan is, it is a reduced playbook. So it's half of the plays, and you have 2 seconds. And after 2 seconds, Brown said, you run. If it's not open, you run. Now, granted, now teams are going to start scheming against this. That was not the case before. He had all these reads. But if you look at him playing early, especially in the first half of the Kansas game, I do not believe Garrett Green can handle a progression of reads. He can do one, maybe two, but he looks at the play.
He can't do the route tree.
Whatever the play is called for is where it's going, unless there's a catastrophic change in development. But he left Traylon Ray. Traylon Ray might be the most underrated receiver in the entire country. He's open on every freaking play, basically. Cole Taylor is maybe the most underrated tight end in the country. He is bigger than everybody else. He's open on every freaking play. He never checks down to Cole Taylor. I don't know how Cole Taylor's getting these 50 catches he's talking about in the offseason. He never checks it down to Cole Taylor. He looks for Hudson Clement 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And he got 150 yards, but he's living on Hudson Clement. He cannot do the route tree. Whatever the play is, he lives there. But in the 2-minute, he didn't do that. The game winner is to Rodney Gallagher. He's scrambling most of the way. Hudson Clement was basically a decoy the final 3 minutes.
Yep.
Now, the problem is you can't do that through an entire game, because if you do that, whether you score or not, you put your defense on the field way more, and the defense is so bad. Now, they are getting a pass rush they didn't have before. TJ Jackson, I love Eddie V. He's a nice guy. TJ Jackson's already better. I don't care if Eddie V is healthy tomorrow. He's now a backup to me. I think they would put him back in the lineup. That's not a smart move. TJ Jackson is way better. Tyron Bradley was freaking Big 12 Defensive Player of the damn week. I mean, they have pass rush guys that were not there before.
Correct.
The secondary is still really, really bad. Garnet Hollis, the secondary he was on in Northwestern, was not ranked as bad as the one he's on now, because he literally has had no good highlights all year. The only one you could argue is a penalty. It's been all bad. So they are really exposed there. And the backups playing, I don't think that makes it that much better, even though Jalen Daniels didn't get it done. I think it was more on him. He just looks totally out of sorts. I'd love to see over-under on what they put in terms of attendance at Arrowhead, because they're going to play home games at Arrowhead later, and they are bad. So I can't see who's going to go to those games. But that's the problem. I don't think you can do the 2-minute thing that everybody wants, or that they are really good in all the time, because the defense will allow tons of points and they will just be worn out earlier. And I do think it'll be easier to scheme against. But yeah, whoever wins that Iowa State game, that could be a swing. West Virginia is in there. This year is setting up, George, to be probably what the committee does not want. And it does scare me on when we're going to get to a scenario where only the Big Ten and SEC have the automatic bids and everybody else is an at-large, because this sets up to a non-ranked or a 25th ranked conference champ in the playoff as a 4 seed. And I do not think the committee wants that in their heart of hearts. And if that happens, I think they're going to screw these conferences in the future. I do not think that's good for the future of these conferences, to have West Virginia not be ranked and win a Big 12 title. You want it probably for chaos and that you're a W alum. That's what you're looking for. I think that would lead to the Big 12 losing the automatic bid within 2 years. Because I don't think they're going to want that. And people say they can't take it away. Why not? They've been making all these decisions. They've been changing the decisions every year. I don't think it's guarantee that you can't do that. Part of it is you have to acquit yourself. Is that acquitting yourself? I think they're better off with Utah getting in as the champ, getting the 10 spot, being ranked.
That's yes. We realize they are the third in this tier of supremacy. But
I'm not even sure they locked in being. No, I think it's ACC and Big 12 battling it out. The ACC could argue that they are the third best conference. If you're talking about who are your best teams who have a legit chance at making a run.
The ACC
Miami,
has
Clemson, Louisville is more than
with
Utah
no offense to
and
Miami,
State.
and Miami's got the legacy name. The ACC had a better argument if Clemson and Florida State were top 15. I know. Let me finish the sentence. If Clemson and Florida State are top 15 teams, Florida State has obviously done what they're going to do. I don't think Clemson's going to be there at the end when
Why do you require them in the ACC though? Who's the Big 12 top 15 teams? It's just Utah.
But no, to your point that the ACC looks a lot better when it's Florida State and Clemson, who are admittedly by their admission and by the lawsuits of them trying to get out of it, their two biggest brand of programs. When we go down the line and it's Miami and Louisville, okay, Miami, which hasn't been back.
Yeah, if Miami wins, I think they're fine. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Sure, but we're looking at Miami, Louisville, and then over here we've got Utah and maybe Iowa State. It's kind of on the same tier, at least in this season. In my opinion.
But you're saying that the Big 12 is clearly the number 3. What I'm saying is there's a debate. If you're saying that Miami's going to fall off,
my opinion is that the Big 12 is the number 3 because their top chunk tier of, let's say, 6-ish teams, schools are better than the ACC's top 6 schools.
I think, and as I said at the beginning of the show,
in this moment in time we're at right now in the year of our Lord 2020.
Yeah, I'm talking about even this week. I think the Big 12 has more good teams. I think the ACC, and this is how they've been ranked so far, has more teams that are close. Not any of them are elite, but are closer to that status.
That's fair.
If you go Miami, Clemson, Louisville, and that's top 20. That's 3 top 20 ranked teams. Kansas State, I believe they're 22nd. They're hanging on by a thread in the rankings. Yeah. Iowa State is there, and then Utah. If you're telling me who is a better,
there's a large gulf from Utah to Iowa State and Kansas State. That's a bigger gulf than it is from Miami to Louisville to Clemson. Yes.
Yeah, and I also think, for the Big 12's credit, it's much closer between Kansas State and, say, West Virginia than it would be, say, Pitt is the number 4 ACC team right now, from Pitt to like North Carolina or Virginia Tech. Like North Carolina is toast, and Virginia Tech is going to lose 4 or 5 games like they do every year at minimum. I think West Virginia has a closer opportunity to squeak in there than those teams do in terms of depth. But or Cincinnati or whoever you want to mention. But what I'm saying is that if you're telling me who is going to give more top 20 teams at the end of the season, I think the ACC likely has more top 20 ranked, top 15 ranked teams at the end of the year, regardless of who's in the playoff and who's not. I just do not see anyone besides Utah, maybe Iowa State and Kansas State. But if you're telling me who's better between a 3 pairing right now on September 24th as we're recording this, year of our Lord 2024, all those 24s, I would say that this is the debate. Who's better? Miami, Clemson, Louisville, or Utah, Iowa State, and Kansas State. And I think the ACC trio is probably better right now.
I'll swap Iowa. I'm trying to think which one I want to keep. I'll swap Iowa. No, I'll keep Iowa State. Keep Iowa State, and I'll swap in Oklahoma State for Kansas State, because Oklahoma State's still hanging there, even though they just lost to Utah. So that's your other Big 12 team.
Yeah, and then it's still the same type of scenario. I mean, I still don't.
I'm not saying it's not close. There's not a debate. I just believe that the Big 12 has the better.
And Miami is just as much of a brand name as Utah.
Yeah. That's why I think it's pretty level.
But you have Miami and Clemson. Clemson is a better brand name for college football committee than Oklahoma State is, and Miami is a better brand name than Utah.
I just don't think Clemson's going to be there at the end of the season. That's my point to why I think the Big 12 ends up.
Well, but I also think Clemson, Miami, those teams are going to get tripped up at points. But I also think Iowa State's going to lose a game. I also think Kansas State's going to lose again.
To the original
Oklahoma
point,
State is going to lose.
The Big 12. I'm not worried about the Big 12 losing an auto bid, because I think the Big 12 long term is better positioned as a football conference than the ACC is.
Oh, I'm talking about this. No, I just was talking about this year.
Okay. Well, you had spoke earlier to, them potentially losing their automatic.
Well, I think that's
conference
an
bid.
issue for both. I'm saying that if you have for both conferences, who are
Yeah.
the ACC and the Big 12,
Yeah.
if you have a situation where an unranked or a later ranked 22nd ranked
Yeah.
team wins the conference this year and next year, whether it be Pitt,
Mm-hmm.
West Virginia, whoever, if that is the case, then I do think the committee, ESPN, whoever is in charge here, really, in all reality, may get together and say that the SEC and Big Ten are clearly better.
They are.
Better. But that means they don't want to give the automatic bid anymore. Because as I said on the show we had weeks ago when we previewed the entire season, if you have a scenario, George, where West Virginia wins the Big 12 and they are a 4 seed, and Penn State gets killed by Ohio State and USC and is ranked 15th in the country and is not in, but they mollywopped West Virginia head to head, the committee is going to say they hate that. They're going to hate that. So that's what I'm saying.
They are, but you're cruising more toward we're not going to play the scenario out, but that's anarchistic, blow the whole damn thing up scenario at that point.
Well, I'm
where
saying
the conferences
but
take
I said
their own power.
If you have a non-ranked team win the conference, you likely are going to have that scenario occur. A non-ranked team is going to lose 3 to 4 games. If that scenario occurs, you're then going to be in a bit of a chaos. I think you're adverse. In terms of the conference that's better right now,
but
I
that's
think
next to impossible when there's no. That's next to impossible now that there's no divisions. So when you've got the top 2 teams.
No, because you could have tiebreakers come into play. Your runner-up could have tiebreakers.
Sure, but I still next to nearly impossible, less than a 1% chance that it might be a low-ranked team. You might have a team that's like 20-something.
But that's what I said. I said from 22nd on.
But you just said unranked a minute ago.
I said if you can hear the whole show, I said low-ranked or unranked.
Okay,
and I literally said from 22nd on.
Still, just the possibility that voters are going to see those teams that are in contention and tie, and they're going to get them. They're going to give them a courtesy ranking there. I think it's
do that though. When I remember Pitt won the Big East, they were 24th in the country. They did not give them up for winning a conference.
Yes, in a day and age when the Big East had 8 teams that played football, maybe 10.
I'm just saying that there was disrespect to certain conferences that may still exist.
But I think this model has overcome a lot of that when you're including 12. And you've got 4 automatic bids going to the P4 conference.
But that's also a different conversation than who's the better conference. I'm saying
no. We had but your overall overarching point to round it out is that those 2, the Big 12 and the ACC, could be in jeopardy of losing their bids in some sort of future thing.
If they keep doing this, if there's chaos.
But it would literally require those 2. The odds of that are just so highly unlikely because you'd have the SEC and the Big Ten would then create their own super league. That's what basically happens there in that instance.
Well, I mean, blow the poll up and we blow the CFB up. If that occurs,
they're not going to. They're not going to lose their automatic bids before the whole thing implodes in a fiery nuclear disaster. That happens before they lose. They will not lose their auto bids. If they lose their auto bids, the other 2 conferences riot and and things just go nuts at that point. So,
well, but I mean, this is years down the line. I'm not saying next year, but I'm just saying that if that continues to be the trend years down the line, that is what I would be concerned for, especially when you're still having conference realignment occur and you're still having backdoor deals occur, and the ACC. I don't think they're going to win the case. But if Florida State would win the case, the ACC would be certainly in trouble of imploding.
Then there's an issue. Yes.
And so it's not like it's unheard of. If Florida State wins the lawsuit and the ACC implodes, then they're deciding whether they're coming to the Big 12.
Joining the Big 12, joining the Big 10, or the SEC.
They may not, because those Miami and those programs may say they're too good for the Big 12. They may not.
But Miami's been a low-key reputed Big 10 target. And
they may go to the Big 10, sure.
Then we're just down to 3 conferences at that point. So
again, I mean, but that's all possible. But as we speak now on this reality, I do think as we're speaking currently, the ACC is not clearly the 4th conference. As we're speaking now, just on the current rankings, it's certainly a debate between the Big 12 and the ACC. And you could argue
as we speak now, it's a debate. By the end of the season, I think the Big 12 will prevail
Well, we'll see. I'm just
on the whole.
That's a
But
different thing. But as we're speaking now,
yes.
I do think the ACC. You could argue even there's a little disrespect conversationally to the ACC. I mean, as we're speaking now, this is how college football works. It makes no sense. People rank them one spot and then go on a show and say that.
Well, but and again, a lot of that is coming off of this past season with the realignment shuffle, where the Big 12's additions, specifically in football, are better than the ACC's additions, which were scrambling for Cal and Stanford, who are two academic institutions that really could care less if they played sports, and then Southern Methodist, which also doesn't make any sense. So that was their additions to cobble together and shore up.
The Big 12 additions were better, but the only thing defense on that would be the ACC didn't need to add teams as much.
They didn't to bolster football. They did if they wanted to continue to be relevant in a conference.
They had to add the numbers, but I mean, they didn't have to add
the
numbers, but they didn't have to add. Like when the Big 12 lost Oklahoma and Texas, they lost the Blue Bloods. The ACC could argue, we didn't know Florida State was going to be horrendous, that Florida State and Clemson, they already had their Blue Bloods.
Yes.
So as long as they have their Blue Bloods in place, then they didn't have to add quality programs. They just had to add numbers.
Yeah.
The Big 12 had to add some good teams.
Good teams.
That's the difference. They didn't have to add to the level of the Big 12 adding, but
still the point remains the Big 12's additions were better than the ACC's. Now, if we get after the season and the ACC looks better, thanks to the help of teams like Miami and Louisville picking up the rope where Florida State and others have fallen off.
Well, it
looks different at the end of the season.
It also depends on, as much as the Big 12 brags about being deeper, and that's even what Brett Yormark sells. Again,
the cannibalization is not good.
Being deeper, I don't think is going to help you get at large bids.
Does not help your profile.
You could argue all day on if your conference champion should be
great for the programs in your league, not great for your programs on a national scale.
Yeah, it may be a situation, George, that if Utah wins the Big 12 and say Miami wins the ACC, you could argue that Utah should be the 3 seed and Miami should be the 4 seed. Whatever. But that doesn't mean the Big 12 is going to get in that large bid. Probably not the ACC either. But the Big 12 may have all these teams cannibalizing themselves, that if Kansas State is the best of the bunch at ranked 22nd, or if Iowa State's ranked there, I mean, that's not impressing anybody. In terms of being that top 12 spot, it's hard to see a path for either conference to get at large bids outside the conference champ on a regular basis, unless the Miamis and Utahs don't win the conference. That's why when your original question, that's why I think Miami's in a real good spot, because even if they do get tripped up, they're likely in the conference title game.
Yeah.
All they have to do is get there. If they get to that game and lose, I think they could argue for an at-large bid. And if they win it, obviously they get there on the automatic. They would have to really collapse in my eyes for them to be totally out of it. I think Miami's in a good spot, and maybe Utah is too. And I don't believe in Colorado, but Miami and Utah are still in good spots.
Yes.
But that's the only opportunity to get in that large bid for those conferences, is if those two don't win the conference. But Miami is a team that I think college football secretly wants to be back to what they were. I mean, that is going to bring ratings. They have a lot of bandwagon fans that never went to that damn school. Like, they are a program that if there's a swing scenario where they get tripped up, like you're saying, and they are ranked 14th going in the final week or something like that, I could see the committee bumping them, because they just want them there. Like, that's a program they want back. And it'll be interesting. Obviously, they're in the Big Ten, but if they do that to Nebraska, those programs that are normally part of the college football community but haven't been good for so long,
is there in the nostalgia?
Yeah. Like, if they bump them in, I think you're still going to get controversial 10 through 12, where you're going to still see some TV, some ratings, some blue blood get bumped in. The otherwise, that's why I also asked about Ole Miss. They're arguably a program that's been a long time, but they're not really in that group of blue blood with Alabama. Like, how would they be treated because they're going to lose a couple games? That'll be interesting to me. They've been around forever. Ole Miss feels like college football for sure.
Yeah,
but they're just not treated the same way the others are, whether that's fair or not. So it'll be interesting what happens in that regard. But we also are way too early in the season, and I do think still, and they're never going to do this, that it'll make it easier on any of these conversations is if they just don't have a college football playoff ranking until maybe the final week of the season. It's going to come out way too early, and then it's going to confuse everybody. Because as you're saying, you're going to see 3 teams in the ACC, maybe 3 or 4 teams in the Big 12 in that damn thing when it comes out in the middle of the season, and then you're predicting everyone's predicting all these things to happen, and then people are going to say, well, they only lost 1 game and they were ranked 17th 3 weeks ago. How does it make sense they're now ranked 30th and not even close to the thing? And it's going to be like, this is week to week. We shouldn't even have done the other ranking. We didn't even need to do it. Just pretend it didn't happen. I wish everybody would shut their brain off until week 10. Basically.
Can't do it, Mike. Can't do it.
Yeah.
I'll make as we round out the show, a quick editorial correction. I believe I identified Starkville as the home of Ole Miss. That is Oxford.
Oh, yeah, Oxford, Ole Miss. Yeah, I didn't even hear you. Yeah, Oxford. Yeah.
Starkville, of course, home to Mississippi State. Apologies to the dozens. Let's
that would
round it out.
Yeah.
With Major League Baseball.
Well, because you also, I think you kept saying Mississippi. You refused to say Ole Miss. You're welcome to say Ole Miss. It makes it.
Somebody tweaked me on this the other day. He called me like a Keith Jackson thing, and it is where I like saying like the name of the college is University
but the
of
program,
California.
once the program's adopting Ole Miss. It's all over Twitter.
Oh no, the program adopts Ole Miss. Mississippi. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm very
Eli Manning's calling him Ole Miss on Manning Cast.
Oh no, I got no problem calling him Ole Miss. I just like using I like the formality sometimes as well.
But I think that might have been why you're giving the wrong.
That's
spot.
A good point.
So I think if you're going to say Mississippi, you got to throw Oxford in.
Exactly. but Speaking of formalities. Playoff spots being clinched left and right in Major League Baseball, and the postseason picture is coming into focus. A tribute to Shohei Ohtani, Ohtani-san, arigato, for your majestic season. 50 home runs, 50 stolen bases.
Yeah.
Done for the first and maybe only time in baseball history, considering he is going to pitch again at some point and probably won't be as aggressive on the base pass when that does happen. Probably. But Ohtani's 50-50 season, coming in a game when he had 10 RBIs against the Miami Marlins. Boys, the Dodgers.
The game he did it in was
game was ridiculous. Yeah.
Our
playoff field is nearly set. The Phillies, the Brewers, the Guardians, the Astros, all division champions now. The Yankees are in. They are likely to be the division champion over Baltimore. The Dodgers are in. They are likely to be the division champion over the Padres, though both of those teams are playing each other, and we'll see if that changes any. But for all intents and purposes, the Dodgers and Yankees have won their respective divisions, and so we've got that shaped up. The biggest surprises coming in the American League wild card, where you still got a good handful of teams here still alive for it, including the Detroit Tigers, who have vaulted themselves into playoff contention as the Minnesota Twins and Kansas City Royals.
Nobody had that on the bingo card before the season.
Nobody had that. Kansas City at one point in late August was tied with Cleveland for the division lead and briefly held the division lead. And the Royals have now slipped to the 3rd spot. The Twins completely fell out and are 2 back and are on the outside looking in at the wild card. The Tigers firmly in a wild card position now. And then over in the National League, the Mets and Diamondbacks holding on there in the wild card, with Atlanta nipping at the heels of the Mets, and they have games against each other. It makes for a nice meaty showdown, and this September has been nice. I know people kind of forget about certain things with baseball, but the expanded
happened last year, Arizona, where they won 84 games, something like that, and they won the pennant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they did the same. They're doing the same thing they did a year ago, where they crawl in maybe, and then who knows once you get there. And once you get there, really, who has better pitchers, regardless of what happened prior.
But give me your favorite in each of these leagues, Mike. I do think it's much as I love my Guardians, I do think it's the Yankees. I think that granted they've got some back end bullpen issues for certain.
And Judge finally is turning it on. He's finally hitting.
Judge is finally turning it on. Soto has been banged up, but he'll be back for the playoffs. Cleveland has the opposite, where they've got the best bullpen, one of the best bullpens in baseball history, one of the best season by a closer in baseball history, but they've got the starters are kind of a hodgepodge mismatch because guys have been demoted and guys have been injured like Shane Bieber. And then you go on the so I do like the Yankees still as the favorite there, because when push comes to shove, I think that offense and those players will put it together and overcome the pitching deficiencies. And then we go to the National League side. Sure, the Dodgers are there, and the Phillies, and I like what San Diego's doing. They're kind of like they're not necessarily a favorite, but I think they're obviously got to get their wild card series. But I think they are a potential dark horse out there. If I had to pick a favorite, I'd say it's Philadelphia. Just the right circumstances coming together with both the pitching and the hitting, and what Bryce Harper has done and what Kyle Schwarber is doing are going to be the two guys that lead that franchise like they did a few seasons ago to a pennant. I think that it makes Philadelphia the pennant favorite in the National League.
I think in the National League, it's either Philadelphia or the Dodgers. I mean, it's hard to poo-poo the Dodgers when you have the best player in baseball. You have such a versatile player in the league, and they always have tons of talent, as they do this year. So it's either the Phillies or the Dodgers for me in the National League. Although the Diamondbacks, as I mentioned, they went totally off the board just a season ago, so it certainly could happen again. And the weirdness that I think is occurring right now, especially in the American League, is people are talking a lot about the Yankees. They're finally maybe having their first legit chance to really get back to a World Series. Obviously, the Guardians squeak in there. They do more than people thought. Maybe they're kind of underrated in terms of what they're doing pitching wise. The Tigers have this special year. All these other teams vying for that wild card spot, etc. And George, no one is talking about the by far best franchise of the last 5 years, if not the last 10 years, and that is the Houston Astros.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I get that they haven't done as much this year to warrant
who overcame a 10-game deficit in the first month and a half of the season
I was about to get there. They kind of faded out of the way for a while, and the Yankees, even while Judge was slumping, they were still able to win some games. And on paper, and what's happened this year, for me, the Yankees look like the favorite in the American League. You could actually even argue the Guardians. They almost scream to me what they've done before, where maybe they win a pennant because it's wide open because of their pitching, and then they lose in the World Series. I don't want to put George through that again, but I feel like that could certainly happen with the Guardians. But if we don't get the norm of what we're thinking, just like if we don't get the Phillies and the Dodgers in the National League, it should be one of those two. I think all the Vegas money will be on one of those two. The two best players, all of that. The talents on those teams. To say the Astros are out of the question is insane, and I get that it shouldn't be them, but for what you just said, it could be. They are starting to turn it on at the right time. They've basically been in playoff mode since June, and they have so much experience all riddled through the franchise of even how to plan the lunch, of how to do a rotation, of players that have been there before. It doesn't matter who's the manager and the fact that they've kind of gone through a car wash of champions and who's led that team, and they don't have the same guys. They have so much experience riddled through that organization that they kind of are an October cockroach. And once you get them in a series, I just wouldn't love playing them if I'm the Guardians or one of these teams.
Yeah,
I mean, they seem like they're going to be a problem. And George, this is not a 3-month-long journey. If all of a sudden they get out of their first series and all of a sudden they're trekking along, and then this could be a scenario, we've seen this before, where it's like, okay, wait, oh my God, the Astros are in the American League Championship Series. What the hell happened? And once they're there, you just don't know. So I think they're being discounted for sure, but I think it should be Philadelphia or LA, and then it should be New York. And I will go with the Guardians as a team that I think, especially because bullpen wise, once they're up, they're going to hold on to it. I think they're another team outside of New York that could make a run, but Houston would not surprise me at all. And I feel like they would surprise a lot of other people. And there's just so much evidence of them doing this. They're kind of what the Cardinals were 10 years ago, where every year, even the year they didn't have Pujols, they went to a World Series after Pujols, and people were like, now they don't have the talent edge. Now they don't have the best player. The cockroach thing is over. No, they're just experienced in doing this, and they win again. So it would not be unheard of for them to do this again. But there's one team. I mean, you went through the whole thing. You didn't mention them. I don't. They're a team that's not getting mentioned. But and maybe it's because they're coming out of an easier division. Yes, they had to come back, but Seattle faded. That they are clearly not what they were a year ago. The Rangers got their championship, but they're clearly not what they were a year ago. Obviously, Mike Trout missed most of the season, and the Angels didn't have a chance anyway. And the Athletics are dealing with moving, and they were just a catastrophe. But the Astros are still a damn good team in the postseason. Yes, they won the division kind of by default, not 90 wins. They're winning it because, as I mentioned, everybody else isn't good enough. But
Seattle specifically fell off very hard. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the only. If someone would have told you before the season the Astros or the Rangers are not going to win the division, who else could it be? You would have said Seattle. They've been kind of on that precipice of being really good in recent years and flirting with that. They went down the stretch last year, all of that. But they didn't get it done this year. They disappointed this year for sure. And it'll be interesting what they do in the offseason if they actually buy, because as you remember, prior to this year, they freaking sold. I mean, they sold off of last year. They did not add. So unfortunately, imagine what they would have done if they gave a damn. But they basically 81 wins by not caring. But the Astros, whether it's default or not, once they're there, they are pesky. I just would not want to be playing.
It's basically survive the wild card.
And then they're a problem.
Yeah. If they get Kansas City, it's a good matchup for them because Kansas City's lost Vinny Pasquantino. They've got Bobby Witt Jr., who's playing at an MVP. It won't be the MVP, but playing at an MVP type of level this season. You don't want to see, if you're Houston, you don't want to see Detroit because, again, we're in year 2 of this format. And reminder that Texas was also a wild card team on the other side of the ledger last year, and both were wild card teams that met in the World Series. So does you want to dodge Detroit, presumably, because Detroit is on such a roll, and Tarek Skubal is probably going to be the American League Cy Young Award winner with how well he's pitched. So can you? They're going to set him up to play in the first game of wild card series. And if you're a wild card winner, can you win, 2 games or 2 of 3, but you need 2. And then you go immediately into the weekend. The division series starts October 5th across the league. And then you've just got to win 3 out of 5 there. So
and then we always get the debate.
It happens so quick. And for Houston, I think if they can avoid Detroit, which may happen because Detroit ends up getting the second slot behind Baltimore, then that helps them have an easier path then into the division series and then potentially into the LCS.
And Baltimore is another team that they're kind of the same as they've been. I just don't feel a run happening. Regardless, I just don't feel it for them.
Adley Rutschman's not been himself. They started the season strong. They ran out to a big start, and they were neck and neck with the Yankees until pretty much the beginning of this month, and then New York, who admittedly New York hasn't played as well as they could have just slowly chipped away.
They had an offensive slump for a while. Judge was slumping, but now that he's turning it on again, as long as the Yankees get pitching, I think they are the class of the American League as long as they get pitching. The advantage for the Guardians is they do have pitching. They know they're going to get bullpen. They know they're going to get pitching. If they get enough offense, they could win game 3-1, and then all of a sudden they win a pennant. That is a lot of the time what happens in the playoffs. These teams that are slugging teams that hit all these home runs in the regular season, this is why the Yankees haven't been back to the World Series in over a decade. They don't necessarily do that in the postseason. It gets a lot tighter. It gets a lot harder. It's a lot more matchup driven. It's hard to do that. So if you're living and dying there, it's harder. And the pitching teams usually do go far. But we've seen wild card teams do it before. Certainly last year again was that anomaly year. I'm sure Major League Baseball doesn't really want that again because it was a ratings catastrophe. Despite having the Arizona market there. And I guess the Dallas market, but the 2 franchises they didn't want in that position. But it'll definitely be interesting if the Astros can get out of that wild card. I think they're very pesky. The matchups really do matter. They mattered last year. They're going to matter again. And then as we do close the show, I do think the Dodgers are one of the favorites in the National League, maybe even to win this whole thing. It's because they do have Ohtani, the first 50-50 season ever. It's historic. It's great. He's going to pitch in the future again. He's already, George, and this is serious. I mean, based on what he's done history-wise and what he does as an overall player, he's already vying for the Hall of Fame despite the career being so young. I mean, I feel like it's going to be hard not to put him there eventually, and he's certainly, onward to another decade of play as what the Dodgers would want based on the contract. Question, though, is, and there's some chatter on this, and I think this is an easy answer based on what Major League Baseball has done or what even the writers have done in recent years with the Hall of Fame, is he's not pitching this year. If he was even a little bit, it would be easy. But should a DH win the MVP, regardless of what he's doing on the base pads as well and what he's doing as a hitter, because he's not having to worry about the field and its wear and tear on your body. It's easier. Overall, great players like a Mike Trout, etc., are great and are overall great because of what they do as a fielder and a hitter, not just a hitter. I will say, George, I think for this particular scenario, that's a BS argument, because what he's doing on the base pads is more than just hitting. It's not just hitting. And secondarily, and this is my trump card, if you are going to allow a career DH, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be there, but somebody who is mostly a DH to be in Cooperstown, like an Edgar Martinez, like a David Ortiz. If you're going to put them in Cooperstown in the Hall of Fame for 90% DH play, then you can't not allow a DH to win MVP. You can't have one without the other. When this was 10 years ago and you weren't allowing DHs, okay. But now there's a DH in both leagues. You have DHs who are primarily DHs in the Hall of Fame. If you're going to be embracing the DH, then you can't disqualify an historic DH who arguably is the best player in all of baseball from winning an individual award. He's the slam dunk MVP for me. And I don't think it'll be unanimous because of the damn DH thing, which I think is a travesty.
And he gets the caveat that 2-3 years ago, 21, when he won the MVP with the Angels, he was pitching. So the voters took that into account, pitching and that's a position. Yeah. So he designated hit in that season, and he was a pitcher this season. Of course, he's only designated hit. So, but yeah, obviously, merits winning the award.
I mean, who else would get it if you want it, if not him? I mean, if you're a voter who's going to screw him because of the age, who are you voting for?
It's not Ronald Acuna. Like, who is it? Like,
that's what I'm saying. I mean, what are we doing here? What are we doing?
Ketel Marte. Who am I missing?
We're talking about the first 50-50 season in the history of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't. They're a playoff team. Yes, he didn't pitch, but he did more than just hit this year. The 50 stolen bases matter. He's an overall sound great player, historically great. He's actually even great for the game marketing wise. Again, yes, he had the bump as pitch, but when he was a pitcher back then, he won the award and he deserved it because he was a pitcher and a hitter and he was doing Babe Ruth stuff. He wasn't nearly as great of a hitter then as he is now. I mean, he's a different level, and it shouldn't even matter. If you're going to have DHs go in the Hall of Fame on predominantly a DH career, I don't think you can exclude for the MVP, especially when there's no one else to really vie for it. But think of this, 2 MVPs, an historic 50-50 season. You're doing more pitching while hitting than since Babe Ruth. No one else did that since Babe Ruth. You're going to be pitching potentially next year while probably hitting 35, 40 home runs still. I mean, it proves in the moment if you want to say that, but I don't see how, regardless of where the overall numbers fall, whether he gets 500 home runs, 300 average, 3,000 hits, any of that, I don't see how you keep him out of Cooperstown. Even if he gets hurt, like he is on a trajectory now, still only early in his career, that he already should be there. This is a Sandy Koufax situation where you could 100%. Have a 5-year career and already deserve it. But hopefully we get to see this for the next decade and we get to see some pitching mixed in. But this is almost history repeating itself, where eventually the decision was made, Babe Ruth, you're too good of a hitter to also pitch. Maybe they usher away the pitching at some point. I mean, I know they paid for it too, but if you can get 50-50 MVP as just a hitter, I know you want some pitching, but do you need to start every 5th day? Could it be not skip a start a little bit less? Like, I would sprinkle it in rather than do it full-time pitching, full-time hitting. I don't know how much longer he could do that, certainly after coming off a year of not doing it and coming off an injury. But it is amazing. I mean, everyone else in the history of the game, you have Tommy John, you're done, and he could win MVP. I mean, right? Think of that. But there's also a lot of pressure. I mean, Dodgers and all the money they spent. Imagine if the Phillies or Dodgers do not win the pennant. I mean, again, after what happened last year, that's going to be a disappointment to say the least. But I'm more optimistic on the Guardians than apparently you are based on that bullpen. But I think Houston is a pesky team that no one is discussing, and I would not be surprised at all if they get out of that wild card ground if they win the pennant. Because once they're in the ALCS, they are a problem.
Yeah, they've got to win starts. They've got Tanner Bybee.
Yeah.
They got to get Alex Cobb back. It's not something they haven't been through before in terms of a patchwork bullpen.
Well, I'm not predicting it to make it
patchwork
clear.
starters. Yeah.
I'm not predicting it. But
Paul Bird won them multiple key games in 2007, and that was a team that had CC Sabathia at the top of the rotation. So, yeah, the key is
I hear you. I hear
front end of those guys. But yeah,
I mean, the Yankees are the favorite. If I had to put money down, that's where I would go. I think the Astros are pesky, but I think I do think the Guardians could potentially get it done. And you could argue also took advantage of a situation in the division, even though there's playoff teams there. That division kind of feels like that division's always is, where they're really good teams, but are they a world champion? We'll see. The Guardians are the only team to me that has a chance, but last postseason, I don't think anybody predicted either team. No one predicted either team. So
fun time coming up postseason, October, college football, full swing, a lot of good stuff. We'll have it all for you here on the HBS. A reminder, we put a bow on this edition of the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show to find us wherever you get your podcasts on Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google/YouTube, and more. Just search Howitzer wherever you find podcasts. And also check out the work of our dear friend Kellen B. Conley at hyphenuniverse.com. You hear his music right here every time on the HBS, as well as the Hyphen Podcast Collective, Morgantown, West Virginia-based podcast collective, bringing great podcasts to the people, podcastgroup.com on social.
Find us on social at House of Buzz-saw for the show, at Gerbo3, at Mike Asti 11. Of course, find us everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you can't find us, you are just not trying hard enough, because we are all over the place and there's so much going on right now that it's easy to find. So just fire up the Google machine, listen to the HBS, and check in with us again in another month, as we have a lot more to talk about at that point. I think where we will be at that point,
man,
in the sports world with what's gone on to this point.
This has been another edition of the Howitzer and Buzz-saw Show, where we conquer top 25 rankings, postseason scenarios, and sports radio.
One day at a time.